Can we either lower this?
If everybody will please take a seat, we're going to go ahead and get started.
It's a cushion. There was.
I haven't used a cushion since I was 6 years old at the barber.
All right, good evening. I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'd like to ask everybody to please silence their cell phones and beepers if they have. Before we get started, I just want to wish everybody a healthy and a happy new year, and welcome back, and thank you for coming. Good evening. This board is comprised of 7 members. 4 members of the board shall constitute a quorum, and the affirmative vote of 4 members shall be necessary for the adoption of any motion. If only 4 members of the board are present, an applicant may request and be entitled to a continuance to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the board. If a matter is continued due to lack of quorum, the chairperson or secretary of the board may set a special meeting to consider such matter. In the event that 4 votes are not obtained, an applicant, except in the case of a comprehensive plan amendment, may request a continuance or allow the application to proceed to the city commission without recommendation. Pursuant to resolution number 2021-118, the City of Coral Gables has returned to traditional in-person meetings. However, the Planning and Zoning Board has established the ability for the public to provide comments virtually. For those members of the public who are appearing on Zoom and wish to testify, you must be visible to the court reporter to be sworn in. Otherwise, if you speak without being sworn in, your comments may not have evidentiary value. Lobbyist registration and disclosure. Any person who acts as a lobbyist must register with the city clerk as required pursuant to the city code. As chair, I now officially call the City of Coral Gables Planning and Zoning Board meeting of January 10th, 2024 to order. The time is 6:02. Jill, please call the roll.
Robert Behar.
Here.
Julio Gabriel. You requested to be excused.
He's sick, correct?
That is correct.
And he didn't want to give any of us the cold that he has. Thank you. Bless him.
Sue Karolinski. Here. Felix Pardo.
Here.
Javier Salman.
Presente.
Chip Withers.
Here.
Avi Eisenstadt.
Here. Notice regarding ex parte communications. Please be advised that this board is quasi-judicial board, which requires board members to disclose all ex parte communication and site visits. An ex parte communication is defined as any contact, communication, conversation, correspondence, memorandum, or other written or verbal communication that takes place outside a public hearing between a member of the public and a member of a quasi-judicial board regarding matters to be heard by the board. If anyone made any contact with a board member regarding an issue before the board member must state on the record the existence of the ex parte communication and the party who originated the communication. Also, if a board member conducted a site visit specifically related to the case before the board member must also disclose such visit. In either case, the board member must state on the record whether the ex parte communication and or site visit will affect the board member's ability to impartially consider the evidence to be presented regarding the matter. The board member should also state that his or her decision will be based on substantial competent evidence and testimony presented on the record today. Does any member of the board have such a communication and or site visit to disclose at this time? No? Swearing in. Everyone who speaks this evening must complete the roster on the podium. We ask that you print clearly so the official records of your name and address will be correct. Now, with the exception of attorneys, all persons physically in the City Commission chambers who will speak on agenda items before us this evening, please rise to be sworn in. Thank you. Zoom platform participants. I will ask any person wishing to speak on tonight's agenda item to please open your chat and send a direct message to Jill Menendez, stating you would like to speak before the board and include your full name. Jill will call you when it's your turn. I ask you to be concise for the interest of time. Phone platform participants. After Zoom platform participants are done, I will ask phone participants to comment on tonight's agenda item. I also ask you to be concise for the interest of time. First, we have the approval of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at December 13th, last year's minutes from December 13th, 2023?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any comments?
I'm sorry, who's second?
Robert.
Mr. Behar?
Thank you.
Have you heard no comments? Call the roll, please.
Sue Karolinsky,
Yes.
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
Javier Salman,
Yes.
Chip Withers, Robert Behar,
Yes.
Baby Eisenstadt.
Yes. The procedure we'll use for tonight. First, we'll have the identification of agenda item by Mr. Caller, presentation by applicant or agent, presentation by staff. Then we'll have then I'll go ahead and open for public comment. First in chamber, then Zoom platform, then phone line participants. After which we'll go ahead and close the public comment. We'll have board discussion, motion, any further discussion if necessary, and hopefully a second of a motion. We'll have board's final comments and then a vote. Mr. Caller, if you'll please read the, actually, before we go ahead and start, there are two items that have been deferred. E3 and E7 will not be heard tonight.
I think we should have just a motion on those, just to make it official.
For the
items.
deferral?
Deferral of items E3 and E7. Do we have a date certain on that, or no date certain on those? No date certain.
So moved.
Second.
We have first and second. Any discussion? No? Call the roll, please.
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
Javier Salman,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
Sue Karolinsky,
Yes.
Baby Eisenstadt.
Yes. The first item is E1.
Item E1. A resolution of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, granting conditional use approval pursuant to Zoning Code Article 14 Process, Section 14-203, Conditional Uses for a walk-up counter as an accessory use to Sandwich, a restaurant on property legally described as Tract A Plaza, Coral Gables, also generally known as 111 Palermo Avenue, Suite 103, Coral Gables, Florida, including required conditions providing for repeal or provision, severability clause, and an effective date. Item E1, public hearing.
Just request it. Oh, okay. That's it.
If it could have the applicants in the middle, sorry, applicants' PowerPoint, please.
Oh, good. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Good evening.
They weren't sworn in.
The gentleman, you did stand up to be sworn in?
I have. Yes, sir.
Yes. If you could please state your name and address for the record. Thank
My name is Daniel Figueredo, and you're looking for the address for the location? It's
you.
111.
For your address.
Yes, 111 Palermo Avenue,
Thank you.
Suite 103.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Sandwich, Sandwich is a Cuban restaurant. We are the most decorated Cuban restaurant right now currently in the United States. We have 2 Michelins, various awards, and we are now hopefully going to have a location just down the street very soon. So with that, we have a product of our process, of our brand, so to speak, is our window. The Ventanita serves as a very integral part of the overall aesthetic and communicates the narrative of our culture effectively. And so we received a conditional approval from the landlord to have, I suppose, the first service window on the premises. The location that you have here is on Palermo. It's just east of that corner where you have what would be the Sudice, or on the southeast corner where Fogo de Chao is. So you have a good understanding of our position. So the facade that you see here, this is just, I guess, what you see north of where that truck is where that window would be. Moving to the other, this is a rendering that I quickly did just for the sake of giving you a pretty good idea of what that would look like. That is the corner, and we're seeking an approval for the use of this window to be able to serve our customers. Like I said, it plays a very integral part to the narrative of our business. For those of you who don't know us, we are a Cuban sandwich shop. We do everything in-house. This is obviously new to me. I see this as a window. It's part of the DNA of our business. It's a very important aesthetical aspect of the company, and it's I feel as an ingredient to serve our community, and bringing it here to Coral Gables has kind of been a lifelong dream of mine. So here we are. I'm showing you quite a little bit of our aesthetics. We are highly decorated. We pay attention to details. Everything from the aesthetics, design, the materials, the ingredients that we put into our food has been carefully curated. And I intend to ensure that down to the window, the window respects the aesthetics of the plaza. So we can emulsify with the community. I'm going to just show you this quickly, this last slide here, just to kind of give you a little idea of the amount of detail that I put into the overall businesses. I'm an engineer by trade, and I've engineered the entire mechanical nature of our business. And this is going to be the first time that anyone would see it, especially in a public forum like this, the first press of its kind, where it'll produce 250 sandwiches an hour. And it took me about 2 years to produce. And the same level of detail that I put into that machine, I intend on putting it into the window and the business, so we can, I hope I didn't take too much of your time. But it's pretty important to us. So I hope this suffices a presentation. And do you have any questions?
Did they not tell you that you were supposed to bring samples here this evening?
They did not. They did
That's
not.
a good point.
Do we want to
Mr.
defer this for
Felt-
about 30 minutes?
I felt given the current political climate nowadays, that wouldn't be
He wants
that
to
wouldn't have
be
been
in
the
those
best
chairs.
decision.
It didn't take long, Chip.
I know.
So I appreciate your time, gentlemen. Miss.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Your hours of operation, I hope you go past 6 o'clock, because my only complaint about your current facility is at 6 o'clock
Yes, and that's by design, because you can there's labor considerations and there's mechanical considerations, but we've overcome that, and so now that I'm a little more relaxed, the answer is yes. It's taken me 2 years to get to that point, so we will have an hours of operation between. Hopefully, this will be the first location we can serve breakfast, so it'll be 7 to 10. Yeah, at that point, we've resolved a lot of the issues that most people complain about. It's just taking me a while.
Good. I mean, I'm a fan of yours.
Thank you, sir.
Food is great, and
Thank
my
you, sir.
kids are the one that took me there, and
Thank you.
we enjoy it.
Thank you. I take what we do pretty seriously.
Thank you. We have, if you're done.
Yes, sir, I am done.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
We have staff that's going to be doing a presentation also. Brief.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Jennifer Garcia, City Planner. Can I have a PowerPoint, please? Thank you. So fast. This is a conditional use for a walk-up counter. As you know, our walk-up counter in all of Coral Gables is a conditional use, which requires the lengthy public review process. So, as he said, the location of the restaurant will be in the plaza off of Palermo. And you can see here in this aerial, it's pretty much right across the street from the historic building that's there in the center, in the heart of plaza development. They'll take up those 2 bays that I guess are next to a sandwich, some other restaurant, I forgot the name of it, but in those 2 green bays right there. So the future land use is high-rise intensity, the zoning is MX3. There's the bay that the walk-up window will be was highlighted there in red. You can see it there on the top and the bottom image. Again, the request is a conditional use. This is a site plan. So the service area is right next to the walk-up window. There's more or less 9 feet of pedestrian access and sidewalk that's there in front of the walk-up window. It gets wider as you get closer to Ponce. There's a landscape area just outside, as well as on-street parking. That's a rendering that we've seen before of how it will look. and went to DRC January of last year, Board of Architects May of last year. He has neighborhood meeting in March of last year, and here we are for Planning and Zoning Board. So letters were sent to the neighbors within 1,000 feet of the property as required by code. And that happened twice. The property was posted twice, the website was posted twice as well, and newspaper advertisement for today's meeting. So staff determined it is consistent with the comprehensive plan as far as promoting pedestrian access and walkability and interest in the streets. Recommend approval with conditions. These conditions are very standard for these kinds of uses. So the walk-up counter would only be operated during business hours. It would not interfere with circulation of the sidewalk. If any open-air dining would be requested, it has to be a separate sidewalk cafe permit. He has to comply with the noise regulations. It needs to be neat and clean and orderly appearance. And any storage, silverware, other restaurant walk-up counter equipment would not be visible from the street. And to also submit a reserve covenant. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Sue, would you like to go first?
I like it.
You like it?
Do we have any,
Do we have anybody here from the public to speak on this item?
No, we don't.
No? Anybody on Zoom or platform? No?
No.
I'll go ahead and close it for public comment. Sue
Is
is,
that my shortest so far?
I was
like
just
it.
going to say, I've never heard it that short. Felix?
I mean, this is,
Was that a compliment?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's, it's not unique. There's one at the Vicky Bakery down the street on University. So it's been done before in the city. So I think it's going to be a great addition.
Thank you. Chip?
I'm just, ask staff one question. Is there anywhere in the city that something like this would not be admissible or acceptable in your mind?
No, unfortunately, it's a conditional use citywide. So the Starbucks on Miracle Mile had to do the same process. So did Tinta y Cafe on Ponce in the North Ponce area had to do the same process as well.
So if that's, then why is it still a conditional use? Why don't we just write an ordinance to cover stuff like, I'm just questioning that.
Well, if the board feels that they want to recommend to the commission that this change be made, that would be appropriate.
I think that's a good.
That's a
a
very
good
good
point.
point. Robert?
I'm good with it. After Javier and you, I will make a motion.
Javier?
A couple of questions for Jill. There's some parking along the street. How many spaces do we have?
The parking on the street is parallel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many spaces more or less in that area? I see one adjacent to the,
I can check an aerial.
because parking is a bit of an
You
issue.
know what that? Okay, good.
So you have 4 parking spaces along Palermo, and then you have 10 or 12 parking spaces along Ponce.
Here's my concern.
Yes,
You're going to be exceedingly successful.
Thank you, from your mouth to God's ears.
I'm sure it's going to work out fine.
Thank you.
My question is, walk up versus people who drive up to.
Yeah, I mean,
to
I-
meet, because, I mean, I meet at the other places with other people. Hey, I'll meet you there.
Yeah, I think that's a valid concern. The truth is that, you know, the property right now has an incredible amount of corporate environments, and I think most of those people are going to come down from 20 to 11. You've got Bacardi that just signed a 100,000 square foot space. Apple did 50,000 square feet. So I think there's going to be an incredible amount of walking traffic. It's a valid concern. I don't know how to properly answer it, but I feel that most of it's going to be just
You've got a
walking
couple
traffic.
of spaces in front.
Yeah, we have, there's,
be-
directly in front of us, there are 4 parking spaces, and then they have an entire section that's devoted just to Uber, and that's just underneath the, that pathway that takes you from one tower to the other.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
You may want to look into either designating a couple of spaces, like the 15-minute only or something like that, to help ease traffic in that area.
Okay. I
I
can mention
think
that.
that would be, because knowing how these things work,
Yeah.
parking is always an issue. It doesn't matter if you have all this walk-up traffic and whatnot, you're still going to have a pretty sizable amount of people who are going to use it as a meeting place.
Yeah. We could
That's
talk
just
to
my
parking
experience.
about it before first reading, or before commission, sorry.
Okay, I would think that would be advisable. The other issue is, make sure we have a garbage can that's really pretty. out by the thing, because those do generate little paper cups and napkins and all sorts of stuff. So that could easily get a little messy. I know that in the other ones that I've been to, they're constantly cleaning outside, and some of them have garbage, some of them don't. So that may be something that they want to look at and make it part of the requirement. And finally, this conditional use is tied specifically to the tenant at this location. It's not transferable to another tenant at this location without coming to this board. Is that
Correct,
correct?
yes.
Wait,
Did not?
it's a conditional use that's for a walk-up window that's approved. I don't think it's tied to this applicant, something we'll look at. I think it may run with, if somebody buys the property and there's a walk-up window, I don't think it's conditioned just to this owner. Or is
Even
it
if it's accessory use to the restaurant, to the use?
well, as long as it's used as a restaurant.
Craig,
We'll look at that.
When you say somebody buys this property, you're saying somebody buys the business.
Right, or somebody
'Cause it's-
buys this, it's a lease space presumably,
Correct, so
right?
that somebody
So
buys
some-
the business. It would have to be a restaurant that would go in there.
It would have to be a restaurant, it would
Which
have to
then they'd
have,
have the
be under
use
the
of-
same use.
Okay, that's it. Answers all my questions. Thank you very much.
I have a 20-year lease.
So we'll worry about it in 20
I hope to
years.
be there the full 20 years.
I hope to see you renew it.
Yeah. I mean, I have no concerns, but the only thing which I would ask is if something could be put there, that there wouldn't be trash outside of that area, because I've noticed in a lot of these type of businesses, it just automatically generates trash outside from people having cortaditos, cafecitos, and they just
100%. I couldn't agree with the board anymore. We're also using the manufacturer that was used to put all the accessories, the benches, the kiosks. It's called Neti. They're out of Italy. And so I'm going to have 2 Neti trash cans right outside.
Great.
And we are putting in place the first brand ambassadors of Sandwich. So I'm going to make sure that I have an attendant outside greeting everyone and
great.
making sure people feel good and place is clean.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
I have no other comments. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, and if I welcome a friendly amendment to the motion for approval. If you want to put in that to have trash cans,
I don't know if
Can
it's
we do that?
necessary to say for the trash cans only the way he's saying it. I like what Chip said.
But-
For the recommendation.
yeah, but that's a separate. This is not part of this.
It would-
Well, we can make certainly as a condition, well, with regard to the trash cans, if you want to make them as a condition to have an appropriate trash receptacle, that's an appropriate condition. And if you want to add as part of your recommendation that the city commission consider making these walk-up windows as a permitted use under certain circumstances and not require it to be a conditional use in a public hearing, you can make that as part of your recommendation, if that's the case.
I'll make my motion for approval with those 2 recommendations. And the parking is one that I don't know if we could make that a recommendation, something that the parking director has to get involved.
I suggested it. I didn't say it was a
Right.
requirement.
I mean,
It
I
was
like
mainly
it.
a suggestion to help alleviate.
I like the idea
traffic.
because then you dedicate 2 spaces
That's what I'm
for
thinking.
their use. I think that's a good, but a suggestion that if that could be incorporated goes along with it.
We have the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Javier. Any other discussion? No. Call the roll, please.
Javier Salmon,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
Sue Kowalinsky,
Yes.
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
Baby Eisenstadt.
Yes. Welcome.
Next meeting, please bring some samples.
After the approval, it's okay.
After the approval, you can bring them.
Next item is E2.
Yeah.
Caller, if you'd read that into the record, please.
Item E2, ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for a text amendment to Appendix A, site-specific zoning regulations, Section A-94, Snapper Creek Lakes of the City of Coral Gables Official Zoning Code to include all types of accessory uses in the rear yard ground coverage calculation, to remove outdated Section A-94-2, and to provide consistency with the Snapper Creek Lakes protective covenants by increasing various setbacks, providing for severability, repealer, codification, and effective date. Item E2, public hearing.
Ms. Russo?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Laura Russo with offices at 2334 Ponce de Leon Boulevard. I am here this evening representing Snapper Creek Lakes Homeowners Association. I have with me the president, Alex Quevedo. I have the Honorable Alan Fine, who is a member of the Board of Governors, and Heather Quinlan, who is the administrator and dockmaster. A little bit of background. Snapper Creek Lakes was one of 3 subdivisions that the city of Coral Gables annexed into the city boundaries back in June of 1996. It is, for those of you who don't know, a subdivision at the southern end of Coral Gables composed of approximately 124 platted lots, bordered by Red Road, Old Cutler Highway, and then it's an internal boundary. There are 122 building sites. There's a minimum of 1 acre required. So all the lots are a minimum of 1 acre. Some are greater than an acre, and they go up to about 1.5 acres. The city, as I said, annexed the Snapper Creek Lakes and 2 other neighboring subdivisions in June of '96. In 1997, the city passed ordinance 3249 that created a site-specific section in the zoning code for Snapper Creek Lakes. Site-specific regulations, as some of you know very well, are an extension of the zoning code that's tailored for specific areas, whether it be the Ponce Circle Park at Gables Estates, Cocoa Plum, Journey's End, Coral Gables Section B, Riviera sections, etc. The ordinance in particular states that the Snapper Creek Lakes neighborhood of 1 acre building sites has been developed with a character unique to the neighborhood and in harmony with its landscape environs. It includes a changing topography, rich native vegetation, 2 lakes, and homes designed in a classical contemporary style. The ordinance further states, and these are in the whereas clauses, that the residents of Snapper Creek Lakes want to preserve and maintain their neighborhood character in a manner consistent with the high standards of the City of Coral Gables zoning code. Snapper Creek Lakes is a little bit different than the 2 other subdivisions that were annexed at the time. Snapper Creek Lakes has a mandatory homeowners association and recorded protective covenants. The other 2 subdivisions do not. These covenants date back to the 50s when the subdivision was created. Members agree to abide by the covenants when they apply for membership, and they sign that they have read them and accept them. Plans for building a home in Snapper Creek are presented to the HOA, has their own architect that reviews their plans and approves them. For Snapper Creek Lakes, and then they go into the city. We are here this evening requesting an amendment to the site-specific section of the zoning code that pertains to Snapper Creek. The requested amendments are to the side setbacks. In the site-specific, they are 15 feet. The protective covenant has them at 30 feet. The street side setbacks are at 30 feet. In the protective covenants, they're 50 feet. The rear setbacks are at 25. The covenants have them at 30. And accessory building setbacks are at 7.5 feet. And we're requesting 8 feet. And we also have an amendment, which is a clarification of accessory uses. And then there are 2 other minor changes, which are corrections to the marina slip and dock slip numbers. Okay. And that's just, it's the overall the same number of dock slips and the total number is the same. There's just 1 less marina slip and 1 more dock slip. So it was just a correction in the zoning code. So a little history. This proposed amendment came about, and you're going to say, well, Laura, if it was since 1997 and the setbacks have been wrong all this time, why has it never been a problem? Well, it just hasn't. From 1997 to now, there hasn't been an issue. Houses have been built pursuant to the protective covenants. But in the last several years, I don't know if COVID had anything to do with it, the association started noticing that there were problems with plans being approved that went against the protective covenants and also against the city's zoning code. So, for example, if you have a building site that's 1.5 acres, you're allowed a guest cottage, but only if you have 1.5 acres. So there were a few plans that had gazebos that were larger than a gazebo was allowed to be and enclosed on sides and cabanas larger than they were supposed to be. So whenever the designing architect was challenged, he would blame the city architect. So Heather and I had a visit to the city's Development Services Department and met with the city architect and the Development Services Director and the city planner and zoning. And it was determined that, yes, some things were falling under the cracks, and we were catching the zoning code, which was really the city's job. And so it was decided that the best way to address this was just to propose an amendment, and that way we would make it more efficient for both the homeowner and for the city. I'd like to show you just a little quick presentation here. It's very quick just to see if you can get a flavor if you haven't driven through Snapper Creek. So having been in a lot of the different subdivisions and having been in Gables Estates and Old Cutler Bay and Journey's End and Cocoa Plum, you will note Snapper Creek is very unique because the lot coverage is 15% and the accessory lot coverage is 5% of the rear. And the rest of the gables, you know, you're allowed 35% and 10% of the whole lot. So you tend to get not insignificant houses, but you get a lot of lush landscaping, and it's a very unique character. See? So this is the entrance to Snapper Creek Lake. It has a lot of natural hammock, a lot of oak trees. Houses are sort of well tucked into the landscaping. And here is a copy of the ordinance with the proposed changes and strikeouts, which you should have in your package. And to give you an idea, we had, as is required, a neighborhood meeting. We invited not just the entire residents of Snapper Creek, but the city required us to notify residents within 1,000 linear feet of the perimeter. We had quite an attendance, mostly from people from the outside, wanting to make sure that whatever we were proposing here wasn't going to affect them. I also have a map, if you could bring up the map, a map that shows you that we sent out emails to the residents, letting them know about the amendment. The board actually passed a resolution to do this, and we have the supporting emails, and we will be submitting this to the planning department. This is a list of all the people so far in Snapper Creek that support the proposed amendment, and we still have people that are traveling back from vacation, and we have a couple of deaths in here where the family, the estate hasn't decided yet. They haven't had a chance to read it. So this will continue to be updated, but I will submit with the clerk both the map and all the emails that actually support the X being put on this map. So staff has recommended the proposed setbacks that pertain to the side setbacks, both for the regular setback, the street setback, and for the regular rear setback. Staff is not supporting the setback from 7.5 feet to 8, nor are they supporting the clarification on accessory uses that was made. So the clarification is just that accessory uses allow for all accessory uses that are outlined in the zoning code. So the city considers that the language being proposed for accessory uses is a change in policy. And this policy is based on a letter that was addressed to a private attorney from a county zoning official to this private attorney for a property in Hammock Lakes 2 back in 2013. The letter was copied to the zoning administrator of the city of Coral Gables at the time. And the letter states that the county did not count pools as part of their accessory calculations. And I say, so, because a letter is not a law, it has not been codified. I've been representing Snapper Creek since 2007. I helped them with their entire new marina structure back in 2007. I had never seen or heard of the letter until last year. Neither had Heather Quinlan. And as I said to the city, I said, it doesn't make sense to me that to make a change, I notify people all in the community within 1,000 linear feet. I have a neighborhood meeting. I come to a public hearing, but you're going to make a change to a community that no one knows about, right? And you think that that somehow is a policy. I mean, it's being treated as a law, and my answer is, if you want to do that, try to change it, try to codify it into the zoning code, because several years ago, Hammock Lakes wanted to change their lot coverage from 15% to 25%. And they did it by trying to change the 3 annexed areas. And when Snapper Creek got wind of it, they went ballistic because of change in lot coverage from 15 to 25% would drastically change the community. We don't want that. Snapper Creek does not want that. And so my argument is, please accept the proposed amendment as we have proposed it with that language still in it. And if the city decides that that policy of not counting pools counts for Hammock Lakes 2 or Hammock Oaks, we are more than happy. We don't want to interfere with how they want to run their community. But since 1997, when the Snapper Creek was annexed into the city of Coral Gables, pools have been counted as part of the rear setback calculation. So it just does not seem right to all of a sudden change this without going through a full legislative process. So the residents of Snapper Creek Lake never got to have an opinion on that policy, which was not requested by them, and it was not pertaining to property within their subdivision. I respectfully request that you approve the site-specific amendments as we propose them. Thank you.
Thank you. City staff? Lori, you'll reserve some time for
Yes,
rebuttal?
please. I reserve time for rebuttal.
Jennifer Garcia, City Planner, and a PowerPoint, please. All right, so this is a zoning code text amendment to the site specifics of our zoning code, specific to Snapper Creek Lakes. So as she said, Snapper Creek is located between our Red Road and Old Cutler Road, with internal boundaries to the north and to the south. It's mostly, if not all, I believe, all single-family low density in the future land use map, and the zoning is single-family residential. Again, this is a zoning code text amendment to the site specifics. So this is summarized more or less into 5 main points of what they're requesting. The first one is to include all accessory uses and structures, and at this point, including the pools, within the 5% rear yard ground coverage maximum. And I'll go through each of these 5 points in the continuing slides. Also mirroring the 50-foot and 30-foot setbacks that are currently enforced by their private covenants, increasing the setbacks for various accessory structures from 7 feet and 6 inches to 8 feet. Also updating the maximum marina boat slips according to be consistent with their county permit, and then to also remove the redundant section A-94-2 for Snapper Creek Lakes subdivision. So including all the accessory uses and structures within the 5% rear yard ground coverage maximum, this 5% ground coverage maximum is something that's specific to the zoning for the county, for the EU-1, I think was the zoning designation before it was annexed in. So that's very particular to that zoning, right? I'm not sure if you're familiar with our zoning, Coral Gables single family, we allow for about 10% additional for the accessory structures, and that's for the entire property. This is just 5% of the rear yard. So what the proposal is, and I think we've already explained, that in 2013, there must have been some kind of question of how the city is calculating a pool. So a pool citywide, if we, for single family, we always include the pool as an accessory use or structure within that calculation. However, in 2013, something must have happened. Someone requested this letter verification to make sure that we were still keeping our promise to the Snapper Creek and to Hammock Lakes are annexed in together with the same zoning to make sure that we're doing the same calculation because we promised them that we would annex them in with the same rights that they had before they were annexed in. So when that clarification came back that they do not count pools, I'm assuming because it's not an elevated structure, it's in the ground. I'm assuming that's the reason behind it. At that point, there's a policy change to the city. It's absolutely right. That's just a letter. It's not really codified in the code. It's just a letter that was given to staff for them to, from now on, to calculate the rear yard ground coverage maximum separately and differently in Hammock Lakes as well as Snapper Creeks differently than the rest of the city. So again, so the pool would be calculated as proposed with the 5% maximum. So this is a map that shows vacant properties right now, and that's shown in green, the light green, so there's a handful. And then the properties that were built after 2013, because 2013 is when that policy changed. So the second requested change is the mirroring of the 50-foot and the 30-foot setbacks, and that applies to the side street setback as well as interior side setback to be 30 feet. The street side to be 50 feet. And then the rear to be 30 feet. And that's consistent, I understand, to be already being enforced by their covenants. And then increasing the setbacks for some various accessory structures that you have listed in your staff report to increase that from 7.5 feet, which is, again, from the original zoning of the EU-1 from the county, and increasing that to 8 feet. And the last two are pretty simple. The maximum marina boat slips, to update that from 35 to 36 boat slips for the wet marina boat slips, and the dry storage spaces from 32 to 31 spaces. And that's consistent with which has been submitted for the permit. And then the last one is to remove the repetitive section A-94-2, which references Snapper Creek Lakes subdivision, and it refers back to Hammock Lakes for some reason. So they had a neighborhood meeting back in December of last year. We're here for Planning and Zoning Board, and this will move forward to Commission for two readings. They had sent a notice within 1,000 feet of the entire neighborhood of Snapper Creek, and that happened twice for the neighborhood meeting and for PZB. The property was posted in various places for visibility's sake, not the entire area. Website posting, and also newspaper advertisement for this meeting for tonight. So staff has determined that it is consistent for most of the requested items with the comp plan and recommend approval with conditions, and we've gone through those conditions. We'd have issue with not keeping the promise originally before when that's annexed in to now count all accessory uses and structures, including a pool in the rear yard, and then also increasing that setback from 7.5 inches to 8 feet. And that's it. Oh, and again, here's the map of the impacted neighborhoods, or impacted properties rather. So the green represents the vacant properties, which would, moving forward, they would pull a building permit using these regulations as proposed. And then the orange properties are representing the ones that are built between 2013 when that letter was issued and today. That's it.
Thank you. Jill, do we have anybody here for this item?
Yes, we do. We
How
have
many, how many people?
3.
Go ahead and call them,
Oh,
please.
okay. Alex Quevedo.
Good evening. Thanks for having us today. My name is Alex Quevedo. I live at 10950 Snapper Creek Road. I've been a resident there for the last 13 years, and I also happen to be the president of the Homeowners Association. I'm here to, what Laura had described, and Alan will speak to also, this is a very important issue for the majority of the residents in Snapper Creek. We want to protect the character and the charm of the neighborhood. It's unique. Most of us purchased there and moved there because of that. And it's made it something special, and we want to continue to have that. The board unanimously, our board unanimously passed this, what we're discussing. They approved it across the board. We've reached out to, like the map showed, we've reached out to the entire community, and we're over 60%. That's during the holidays. So we haven't contacted everybody yet. We expect that number to probably reach 80, 90% of the homeowners in agreement with what we're proposing today. So I just want to kind of stress the fact that this is something that's extremely important to the residents because of where we live. Coral Gables is a beautiful place, and Snapper Creek is a beauty within the beauty of Coral Gables. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Alan Fine.
Good evening, and thank you for hearing from us. I just wanted to address one point, which is the inclusion of the pools in the definition of accessory use.
I'm sorry, can you please state your name and address, please?
Thank you. I'm not.
Thank you.
Yes, Alan Fine. I live next door to Alex, 10900 Snapper Creek Road. Proudly in Coral Gables. So the Coral Gables Code includes pools as part of the accessory use calculation. For some reason, even though there's never been a letter, a ruling, an ordinance, nothing that says that that does not apply to Snapper Creek Lakes, the department has considered that because Snapper Creek Lakes used to be in the county, somehow the county rule where pools are not included is grandfathered in, notwithstanding the lack of any support for that opinion whatsoever. In fact, in the ordinance 3249 from 1997 in Coral Gables, one of the whereas clauses says that the, quote, whereas the residents of Snapper Creek want to preserve and maintain the character of their neighborhood as it has been developed, and in a manner which is consistent with the high standards of the, quote, zoning code, unquote, of the city of Coral Gables by having site-specific regulations for Snapper Creek. We demonstrated the intent. The city adopted our intent to use the zoning standards of the city of Coral Gables, which included the pools. Nowhere there does it ever say that pools are not to be included. And later on in that same ordinance, it says, in addition, up to 5% of the rear yard may be used for accessory uses and structures. Doesn't say one way or the other whether pools are included, but we adopted the city of Coral Gables code. It should be included. We know that Miami-Dade County does not include it. Again, so what? Like Ms. Russo said, all we're doing is trying to codify on the setbacks, the protective covenants that we have, and the staff has agreed with that part. But because a city commissioner wrote a letter in 2013 to someone on behalf of a homeowner of Hammock Lakes that said, oh, well, the county didn't include the pools, so we won't either. Or actually, that one from the Miami-Dade commissioner said we did not include pools, and we don't. That shouldn't have any effect on Snapper Creek Lakes, who affirmatively elected the city of Coral Gables code back in 1997. It has been the consistent practice, with possibly one exception by mistake, that every set of plans approved by by Snapper Creek Lakes before they go to the city has included the counting of the pool as an accessory use. I think we've discovered one that got through where we made a mistake, but one mistake is not a waiver of a right, especially when our protective covenant state, quote, failure to enforce any right, reservation, restriction, or condition contained herein, however long continued, shall not be deemed a waiver of the right to do so thereafter as to the same breach, and shall not bar or affect its enforcement. So, in summary, and thank you for listening, the concept that a Miami-Dade County interpretation is grandfathered in to Snapper Creek Lakes, despite the plain language in Ordinance 3249, that we respectfully submit doesn't have support, and we request that you support the text amendment and pass that on. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Luis Hoyos.
Hi, how are you?
Can please?
No.
Okay. Please, excuse me, can you swear him in too?
Yes. My name is Luis Hoyos. I live in Snapper Creek. The address is 9950 Seagrape Circle. It's a beautiful community. I have a boy and a girl, and we live super happy there. I probably, if I get older, probably that will be the place where I want to be. It's a beautiful neighborhood. I have lived in Gables before. We built a beautiful house, and we sold the house. It was built by a renowned architect that is here today, Rafael Portuondo. So the process was excellent with him, and we decided to hire him again to build this authentic Coral Gables house in Snapper Creek. In June of 2022, plans were submitted for preliminary review to Snapper Creek. It was not approved by Snapper Creek. July on 2022, Mark Redon, Snapper Creek architect and agent, provide us with a letter by SIC Guilford, clarifying the requirements for accessory structures in the rear yard. Pursuant to says instructions from Mark Redon, our architect revised the plans not to include the pool in the yard calculation. A note on the drawings clearly indicated that us as clients were not including the pool in the calculation. July the same year, 2022, plans were submitted, subsequently revised and resubmitted. August, same year, plans were approved for preliminary by Snapper Creek. September 2022, meeting at Coral Gables with the staff to confirm the letter from SIC Guilford provided by Mark Redon, where the pool was not part of the accessory structure. Coral Gables confirmed. The same month, same year, plans were submitted to Coral Gables Board of Architects. Plans were approved for preliminary, and us as a client begin construction document process. June 2023, plans were submitted for final approval to Snapper Creek. July 2023, plans were picked up. The plans had the approval stamped and signed by Mark Redon and had the approved stamp from Snapper Creek. July 2023. Subsequently, the approval stamp was crossed out by Snapper Creek. So I'm here because we should be looking at the lot that we have in Snapper Creek with a structure already, but we were denied, and I don't want to hire a lawyer to sue them because we have not given the right explanation. I am not a lawyer. We are in the restaurant business, and the last thing we want to do is to sue an association. But there is not something valid to tell us you cannot do this if the people that we hire that are professionals follow the process, went to the city, went to talk to them, and now we know that they're trying to change a code that is not implemented. And yes, I know we signed some rules, but it's not there, it's not clear. So if they want to change the code, it's okay. But I don't think we're supposed to be under something that is not even written down by them. So I'm here just to tell you guys, sorry to say guys, everybody here tonight, they're very respectful people, professional, that it should be clear by them, yes, but we are not giving the right answer for them.
May I interrupt you for a second? You're not in favor of the proposed changes because your case, I think, I don't know if I misunderstand it. It's not something that is, we are gonna give you an answer. That's something that has to come to them. You know, what the association's coming is to have modifications to the current guidelines, for lack of a better word.
I understand that. Yes.
You know, and are you not in favor of that?
I am not right now because we are not. How am I gonna be in favor of something that is affecting me? Yeah, so I am not in favor.
Just a quick question. The reason for the denial, was that a rear area overage
Yeah,
for auxiliary use?
we are not counting the pool.
Is that, but I'm just trying to get to, is this
We are not counting the pool.
pertinent to the item before us today?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is a case that they're trying to clarify between them or not that is affecting us, and probably affect many people that were.
The reason I ask, because I'm not sure, I feel like, you know, your particular case is something that is in front of us today.
That is correct.
Yes.
In other words, we're
It
listening.
may well impact his situation
That's
if there
correct.
is a change.
Correct.
Right, that's why I asked, is
Right.
he in favor or not? Obviously, he's not
Well,
in favor because it will affect
It
him.
will impact his development.
And we already submitted plans to the city. Most of them were approved. They came back with some revisions, but the pool was there, and the city accepted. So this is my case. Thank you very much for listening to us tonight.
Thank you. Can you call the next speaker, please?
Yes, the last speaker is Rafael Portuondo.
Rafael Portuondo, Perotti Architects. One of the things that I take a lot
Could
of
you give
pride,
the address of your office?
5717 Southwest 8th Street.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the things that I take a lot of pride in, and I've known Laura for many, many years, is before we start any project, we go through the due diligence as if the project was starting from zero. Whether we talk to the City of Coral Gables 100 times, we start from zero in every project. We met with Surami Cabrera to clarify how you calculate the rear setback, the 5%. We met with Surami to calculate pools and accessory structures. We met with the Snapper Creek architect, and he clarified for us that the pool was not counted as part of the 5%. We proceeded, because at that point we had an accessory structure and the pool. Our rear calculation was approximately 800 and something square feet. So by not counting the pool, it affected the size of the accessory structure. We proceeded the process of clarifying the drawings and submitted with the note, pool not included in rear setback lot coverage calculation. He approved the submittal. We proceeded with construction documents. If at the time, the architect that represents Snapper Creek would have told us the pool counts, I would have met with the owner and I would have said, listen, they made a mistake, whatever, and we've got to count the pool. But that didn't happen. We proceeded with the most expensive part of architecture, which is construction documents. We submitted it to Snapper Creek and they approved it. So at that point in time, it had all the stamps, as if, like Louis was saying, and we Then we got called a day or so after to unapprove it. So whoever was a person involved or not involved was obviously not talking to their hired architect that represents Snapper Creek. And so, as architects, the only thing we can do is follow the guidelines of the person in charge. Because of that, we actually met with the city attorney. And we wanted a clarification on that. So the clarification was that when properties are annexed from Dade County, they follow the Dade County regulations, and the city clarified to us that that we are right in not counting the pool. This is from Cristina Sanchez Suarez, right? Suarez. And so we had a meeting with her, with staff, and the whole thing. And they said to us, look, Snapper Creek is coming to present to clarify the code. But why don't you submit your drawings so you document and you're locked into the current code, which is what we've done. In the comments we got from the City of Coral Gables, the pool, not included. In other words, it wasn't part of the calculations. They approved it that way. There was a calculation, there was a comment on trellises and something else that we can solve. It's not a big deal. And so what angers us and angers me is that we did everything by the book, everything, up until getting approvals from Snapper Creek, approvals from the City of Coral Gables. The reason why annexed properties in Dade County that absorbed into Coral Gables, the reason they don't include pools and things like that is because they would be including an existing non-conforming, according to the attorney. In other words, if there are 50 houses in Snapper Creek that have pools that don't count, that means that there would be automatically 50 non-conformings, according to the city attorney. While listening to this presentation and seeing that they're requalifying the calculations of pools and accessory structures is great. But that's not what happened to us. And the reason I'm glad that my client, my friend, is here not agreeing is because it would affect him. And it would have affected me. And I asked Laura, who's going to pay for this after getting approved by Snapper Creek? Who's going to pay for all the fees that our client has paid, approvals from Snapper Creek, approvals from Coral Gables? So yes, we're upset because of the process. And so I'm going to reiterate what we did. The city attorney and the staff said to submit the drawings, so you're locked into the code modification that Snapper Creek is going forth with. And that's what we did. So we're hoping that this can solve itself. We're hoping that it solves itself for our client because we feel that either Snapper Creek was not organized, they hired the wrong guy, he was given the wrong information, but he's the one that told us how to calculate for Snapper Creek. So that's the process that we've gone through. That's the process that we've been given advice by the city attorney. And so we're upset. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Jill, any more speakers?
No more speakers.
What about on Zoom?
No.
On phone?
No.
At this point, I'll go ahead and close it for public comment.
Can I have
Laura?
Thank you. Final word. I'm going to hand out to you the letter that has been addressed so you can take a look at the fact. The letter is from a David Johnson, an architect who's been around a long time. I don't know if he's still practicing, but I've worked with him before. Back in 2013, it's obviously in response to a letter, but we have no idea what this zoning permitting division chief is answering because the letter doesn't accompany it. It copies the city of Coral Gables, and it only references as a short paragraph, so you'll have a chance to read it, Hammock Lakes 2. And so what I want to make clear here is, and that case is totally irrespective because that's a whole separate thing and has nothing to do with this amendment. we brought this amendment to make clear, besides the setbacks, is all pools, new pools that have been built since 1997 have counted. As the Honorable Judge Fine said, there may have been one that slipped through. If a pool had a home that did not count because it was built when it was unincorporated, if the house is renovated, or if the house is demolished and rebuilt, the pool has counted. So other than one, there has not been pools that have not counted in the rear setback. So for us, this language is to clarify, because the city is acting on this letter, and this letter, there is no attachment or record that shows that the zoning administrator at the time sent this to zoning technicians. It did not go to Hammock Lakes. It definitely did not go to Snapper Creek. So once again, the city is acting on a letter that has not been codified. And while there may be cases in Hammock Lakes and in Hammock Oaks where they don't count the pool, that's okay. We're not asking for them. We are here telling you the pool has always counted since we became incorporated, or Snapper Creek, I wish I lived in Snapper Creek, became incorporated into the city of Coral Gables. So the language wasn't to change, it was to clarify, because this letter exists and people are being confused, but this letter is not law. I mean, the whole reason for having a zoning code and the legislative process is to provide notice and an opportunity to be heard. And I submit that the residents of Snapper Creek are going to be affected by interpretations of their code, of their site specifics that are going to differ from the ones that they are going to give, because they're going to say, we're following the city of Coral Gables zoning code, and somebody's going to pull out this letter, and we're going to say, but it's not the law. If the city wants to make it a law, they can amend the zoning code and amend Hammock Lakes, Hammock Oaks, and try to amend Snapper Creek. So I feel that this, and again, the gentleman's case is something entirely separate. It's not here. That's an issue that has to be resolved between the homeowner and the homeowners association. We're here to avoid any mess because, as I said, I've been representing this community for a long time, and I never knew this letter existed.
But
Okay.
Laura, let me, because as the city attorney indicated, it does affect the process tonight. This was an area that belonged to Miami-Dade County, and the rules and regulations that originally were in place with the Miami-Dade County, which did not count the pool as part of the 5%, correct? So do you have in your guidelines specifically say that the pool must be counted in the 5%?
No, but every pool,
But wait, hold on a second, because if you don't have that specifically, to come back and tell somebody says, oh, by the way, you need to count it, you know.
Except everybody else who built a pool from 97, from 2013, and we had examples.
Is it in writing? We say it has to count part of the 5%. Is it in writing? No.
No, because what does it say? According to the city's zoning code, and the city's zoning code has pools as a specific, it doesn't say some accessory uses. And that's why I just want to clarify.
But remember, this was an annex property. This is not part of the original city of Coral Gables.
Right, but when it became part of the city of Coral Gables, there was the opportunity with the site specifics to say, we don't want to count certain accessory uses. We want to eliminate the pool. That was not in there. And then I would even submit that in 2013, when this letter came to be, why did the zoning administrator not say, let's make a change, and for all those unincorporated areas, there were only 3, they have site-specific, let's add that the pool's not counting. I submit that only some people are privy to that letter. It's not shared with everybody, because if you ask people who recently built homes in Snapper Creek, and I gave the city a list of the homes built from 2010, and I said, but you can go back to 97, the pool has been counted in the rear setback, except for the one that we know, and there was an issue there with it being a renovation and it became a demolition. But our covenants particularly say, because something went through doesn't mean it's a change, And the city of Coral Gables, as most of you well know, when they make a mistake, they can pull your permit and say, we made a mistake. But that issue is an issue that the homeowner and the association have to resolve separate and apart from the amendment. The amendment is to clarify for the future that we want to make sure everyone understands the pool is counted. I don't discount the argument he's making, but that's not in front of this board today.
I understand. Chip?
Yeah, hi Laura, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Your Honor, nice to see you too. So the question I have is, do any of these, does your amendment liberalize any of the Coral Gables zoning code?
Does it rely on the
Or
zoning?
is it liberalized? Is it less
No,
than?
this is more restrictive.
Okay, I just want to point that out.
Yes,
Okay.
nothing in here is more liberal than the zoning.
I got it,
code.
okay.
It's, on the contrary, much more restrictive.
Number two, when Snapper Creek was annexed into Coral Gables, along with Hammock Oaks, and were pools counted
In the county, no.
in Coral Gables?
But in Coral Gables, pools were counted as an accessory use.
So, my memory is fading. However, I can tell you that I probably sat through 4 or 5 of these annexations. And the comment was always made that the city of Coral Gables had no problem with current home rule law that these annexed areas had. In fact, they had the right to be more stringent than what the city of Coral Gables implied. And I remember that pretty clearly, and I know you were involved with quite a few. So when we looked at an area like Snapper Creek, as long as their rules were more restrictive with Coral Gables, we basically said, you know what, we're going to back off and let home rule manage their own doings, their own, their own setbacks, their own lot coverages, their own whatever. So I guess my next question to the city is, why are we now trying to liberalize a code when for so many years the deal that we made with these annex areas was it was okay for them to keep their own codes as long as they were more stringent than the Coral Gables code?
Mr. Chairman, if I may comment on that, because in the discussions only currently, what we told areas that could be annexed is if you were allowed it when you were part of the unincorporated area, you would be allowed it in Coral Gables, because one of the concerns that neighborhoods had was that there are areas in Coral Gables that is indeed more restrictive than the county. So that was how to encourage areas.
Okay, I understand that argument.
So, for example, I'll give you an example, like a boat in the side yard. That's a big issue for areas, and it might not be permitted in Coral Gables, but it might be permitted under the county code.
And we didn't allow that. We didn't allow wooden fences. We didn't allow chain link fences. We didn't allow commercial vehicles.
But whatever was permitted at the time that it came, it's my understanding, if it was permitted under the county's
But it's
code.
illegal non-conforming. So when they went to go do any
Well, what
fixing,
they
for example,
did-
your fence
yeah.
falls down and you go replace it, you don't get to
Well,
keep
what
the
they were
wooden
supposed to
fence.
do is they adopted site specifics that were to basically to codify that which was permitted. So, and that was what's supposed to be done. Unfortunately, it looks like in this case, they were silent on this. And the letter from Mr. Byers, who actually I knew, but he's talking about how the county viewed those particular accessory uses at that time.
But he's only referencing a particular property for a particular architect. So once again, my argument is, if the most important thing as part of our democracy, as part of our Constitution, and I've been here, and how many times have I heard, did you tell the neighbors, have you had neighbors meetings, that we are enforcing a policy, not a law, not a regulation, a policy that has not been publicly shared, It has not been codified. It was not sent to every resident. I had to have a letter and a notice. I had to go post signs, and I sent a letter inviting all the residents within 1,000 linear feet and within the Snapper Creek for a change that matched the protective covenants. Yet the city is allowed to make a change that people are unaware of and to enforce it, and it's not a law. And so I'm just trying to clarify the language so that in the future, people look at that site-specific and say, oh, it's counting everything that's defined in the city zoning code, which is how we've interpreted it at Snapper Creek since '97.
Laura, what I'd like to do, I understand, if you're done with your rebuttal, I'd like to give the board members an opportunity to speak. Felix?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is super disturbing, and the reason it's disturbing is that, from what I understand, covenants trump the zoning code. So if the more restrictive is a covenant, you must go by the covenant. Now, is the covenant silent when it comes to calculation of areas of pools?
What the covenant says is that the zoning code prevails. The zoning code of the governing body prevails. And when it went from being the county, it became the zoning code for the city of Coral Gables, which is why, much to the chagrin of many homeowners, rest assured, from '97 on, who built pools, found out that now the Gables counts the pool in the rear setback.
Well, with all due respect to our attorney, our city attorney, Mr. Sotolongo said that legal nonconforming. It's absolutely 100% true, legal nonconforming. But in this particular case, they have a vacant lot. So there's nothing legal nonconforming except the overall regulations of whatever was in there. Correct. So if it was a legal nonconforming, and as Chip said, well, someone has, that's the problem with annexations, that there's always a conflict unless you do a real good job, a thorough job of trying to figure out all the different things. If you have a chain link fence on your front yard, that's great. But if you build new, then all of a sudden you can't do that. Then you have to.
I'm in complete agreement with you.
Yeah, because
the issue is what was done in the annexed areas was they adopted site specifics for each area. So maybe I don't know whether they did or not. If they allowed chain link fences at the time and they wrote in there chain link fences would be permitted in the site specifics, the point of the site specifics is the site specifics actually trump the zoning code. So the site specifics were written so that they were essentially an exception to whatever the general zoning code was.
So,
in this case, it is silent on this issue.
So going back to the setbacks, which the applicant is trying to make the setbacks stricter, going from 7 foot 6 inches to 8 feet, is that to be able to be in compliance with the covenant?
Well, the covenant is a private covenant. Let's separate two different types of covenants. There's covenants that are proffered in connection with a public hearing. Those are public covenants that are accepted by the board. There are private covenants that private communities have, where private communities are responsible and have the right to enforce their private covenants. So this particular community has a private covenant that, in fact, they have a right to enforce. Their covenant may be more restrictive than what the county regulations were at the time. And their covenant governs because these folks bought with the understanding that this is the covenant.
So the question becomes, is the applicant trying to comply with the private covenant that they have on their parcel? So then an architect can come in and say the setback is 7 foot 6 or 8 foot, and now that is also in agreement with the covenant. Because
well, as I understand it, the applicant in this case is Snapper Creek's Homeowners Association. What they're seeking to do is to basically make that private covenant to be part of the county code.
Okay, so
I'm
The
sorry,
city
not the
code.
city code, the city
City
code,
code.
and
right.
that's what, and Mr.
They're
Chairman, I'm
trying to
sorry,
make the
because this
site
is-
specifics change
Yeah.
to align with their.
Right.
And
I wanted to bifurcate that conversation from the pool area situation and the calculation there.
Right.
But the reason that you're here is because you're trying to make sure that they're coordinated,
To-
but staff is recommending against that.
Well, correct. To
can't
have, to
understand.
have them meant, and to answer your question, so if you look on page 1 of the proposed language that I added, so the ground coverage, everything is, and it says, in addition, up to 5% of the rear yard may be used for accessory uses and structures, period. I added the new language, as allowed and defined in the City of Coral Gables zoning code for single-family residential. So it ended uses and structures. So if you're under the City of Coral Gables, you would go to the zoning code. There's a section that tells you in single-family, you can have a guest cottage if you're a certain size, you can have a gazebo, you can have a pool, you can have a trellis, you can have and so we've always interpreted it as per the zoning code. So to me, the language has been just to avoid the scenario that is happening now, and it is to make the mesh more and to make it more efficient for both the homeowner and Snapper Creek and the city, right? So everything is meshed. You know, Gables Estates has site specifics that are different and more stringent than Coral Gables. So does Cocoa Plum. So does Journey's End. And then, as you know, there are sections in the Gables where things over the years that date back from the 50s and 60s have been changed in site specifics.
Can you explain why staff says the ground coverage calculation is outdated? Snapper Creek Lake's protective covenants have stricter setbacks to be consulted with. And then also on page 7 or 2 rather of the application that we all received, it says that the city commission caused tremendous confusion by increasing the lot coverage from 15 to 20%, 25%.
Oh, let me give that example. So just to clarify, so a few years ago, in this previously unincorporated Dade County area, Hammock Lakes, Hammock Oaks, and Snapper Creek, there was a proposed zoning code amendment that was made that was going to be identical for the 3 site-specific sections. And that was to change the lot coverage from 15% to 25%. A letter went out saying this was going to happen. The residents of Snapper Creek went ballistic because they did not want that change. No one asked them if they wanted the change. The city did not approach them about the change. It was one homeowner in one of the subdivisions that wanted the change. That change was made for that subdivision. And I think it was made for the second subdivision. Snapper Creek showed up with a similar map saying, that's okay. They can do what they want. That goes against our community and our wishes.
That only applies to Hammock Lakes?
Excuse me?
Because that only applies to Hammock Lakes because I read a letter in there that says the neighbor from Hammock Lakes was upset because the lot coverage was increased to 25%.
Correct. And that neighbor showed up at our meeting because he's within 1,000 linear feet of the property of Snapper Creek perimeter. Right. And he showed up at our meeting wanting to make absolutely sure that anything we did in Snapper Creek wasn't going to affect Hammock Lakes. And I said, we're only here for Snapper Creek. We showed him the proposed language. And so part of that is each of these communities have distinct character, right? And so we're just trying to make sure that the distinct character of Snapper Creek is preserved and to avoid confusion. We had no confusion with the interpretation, but obviously this letter was taken to be some sort of law, and we just want to make sure that that does not apply to our community.
Well, to be quite candid, I mean, Jim Byers has been there forever. And Jim Byers makes these interpretations, and our city attorney, who worked at the county for a long, long time, knows that there are books of these interpretations. Why? Because they're great guidelines. Not everything is codified, but it becomes consistent with their processors. Unfortunately, we did not have that.
But I think the important thing with the process is it has to be known. If it's not noticed and you don't know of the process, then what is the point of a policy that's not public?
But through the chair and in support of the esteemed Mr. Pardo, we have something called the authority having jurisdiction. And that person's opinion or his interpretation is binding.
Sorry, what did you say? What was it called? The what?
The authority having jurisdiction.
AHJ.
His opinions and his interpretations are, by definition, binding. Because we need something to be able to build to.
But that was an interpretation of the county. It is not, so Coral Gables never wrote a letter and said, hey, everybody, this is how, because I said, is there a letter from the zoning administrator to staff? How was this policy communicated? And how come it wasn't communicated to the residents that would be affected? And there is nothing. They only have the letter that,
No, there's an email from
There's
Mr.
an email.
Graves
There's an email about that.
about that specifically
Saying that, and Trios is going to write you a letter for that.
Only one person speaking at a time because the court reporter is going to have.
Thank you. I should have mentioned that too.
You go ahead. I mean, the interpretation is there.
Yeah, within the package that I just saw, there are emails back and forth regarding this issue.
That's right.
That's opposite to what you're seeking.
right. And that we became aware of this letter last year. And
Not
that's
this letter. I'm
the,
talking about emails. Here, let me see if I can find it.
In the meantime, Felix, are you?
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to take over. I have so many questions, but I'm going to rely on the rest of the board members to ask the questions.
Okay. In that case, I'm going to ask Sue to go next, please.
Hi, Laura.
Hi.
A couple of things. I mean, you're here really to make new and make known what's to happen in Snapper Creek Lakes.
that is correct.
Okay? So everybody knows when these gentlemen have a project, they know exactly what it is, and they have something to rely on, rather than something from 2013 or misinformation from a government body or a lawyer or whatever.
Or an architect.
You want to make sure that everybody is on the same page from here on out.
Correct.
When I saw that map said to me that these neighbors are informed. I'm assuming they're all informed. Number two, it looks to me like a supermajority is for this.
That is correct.
With that said, that's all I need to know to make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Also, that was the shortest.
I'm getting better.
Javier, you want to?
Couple of things here. I also agree that whatever you want to do in Snapper Creek is completely up to you. However, you're drawing a line in the sand. Anything that comes beforehand is open to interpretation. After today, it won't be.
Correct.
Are you 100%
well-
sure that that 5% is something you can live with? Because on an acre estate, assuming that half is the backyard, you only get 1,000 square feet for your auxiliary structures back there.
Just so
Just so that we know what the math
and,
is.
And just to be absolutely clear,
you're gonna live and
it
die
is-
on this
It
one.
is how it has been interpreted, the 5% since 1997. No, but so it's not like we're not introducing something new to Snapper Creek.
No, I
Yes,
just want to
people
make sure,
will-
because this is your bite at the apple, and there
Right,
won't be another
right.
one unless you
No,
come in
no.
and ask for a change.
Yes, and just so you know, emails were sent to the residents so they would understand what the site, the
Did they give them examples of what the rear areas would be and what your maximum size for your pool and or rear construction would be?
I think all of those who have built recently know because they have had that rear area calculated, and they've had calculated the gazebo, the cabana, the house itself can't go over the 15%. They're all
There's a lot of non-conforming structures out there.
that are
A
the
lot.
older structures, but the
Oh,
newer
well,
structures and trust me, they have
I
had
painted a
structures.
couple of them as a youth.
There are some older homes, as we said, we just had 3 homeowners pass away, so there are 3 houses that are in estates. There's several residents that are in advanced age. So yes, there are still homes that have not had any renovations or work done under, the city zoning code that would impact the rear percent. But all houses that have been built, they've had it, they've been turned back, they've been told you have to take the pool and count it because the city of Coral Gables counts a pool as their accessory use. So I understand what you're saying.
I
It's
just want
what
to
the
make sure
community-
everyone is clear here.
It's what the
that it's
community
from here going
wants. Yeah.
forward,
this is
Your
unusual.
argument is with what came before. I'm looking at Mr. Portavondo.
And that's a separate, that's a whole separate from the reason why we're here. Right.
So the only last thing I want to mention is whenever you adopt a more restrictive ordinance than what was previously permitted, you have to tread lightly on that. And fortunately, in this particular case, the local area, the Snapper Creek Lakes, was able to enforce through their covenants more than necessarily what was more restrictive than even what the county had. Okay. So I just
I've been to the design review boards.
I just want you to note that when the city takes on that responsibility, that's a different issue.
Thank you. Javier, you...
I just want to make sure we're all clear here.
I understand this is one of the few cases where I'm asking to be more restrictive than the zoning code.
Laura, we've been at this for years. I've known you, and I just want to make sure that...
As most of you know, I'm usually trying to get a little bit more out of the zoning code. In this case, I'm here happily saying the community wants to be more restrictive.
Thank you.
And they have been. We just want to make sure there's no confusion because of the inconsistencies, even with the setbacks. If someone comes and buys a property and they come from New York and they hire a New York architect and he pulls out the zoning code and the site specifics don't reflect the protective covenants, why have that confusion? We just decided because there's a difference between a 30-foot side setback on a street and 50.
Okay. Javier?
Nothing. That's all I wanted to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wanted to say that, Snapper Creek is wholly different than the rest of the Coral Gables. It doesn't have any sidewalks. It has a whole different landscape language. It's a series of secluded estates that are connected by a very thin little piece of pavement, all right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's their character.
Correct.
So.
And they want that.
And that's fine. And I'm not here to judge or require anything different. But it is a different character. And I applaud your bravado in getting a more restrictive code than inserted into the City of Coral Gables code by reference. So you go to reference, and then there'll be a little asterisk. And if you live in Snapper Creek, here are your requirements, right?
Right.
Okay. Then that would clarify for everything going forward. However, there is a muddled mess here that this decision we're going to make today has nothing to do with.
Separate
so I just want to make sure that we're all clear on that as a board.
Right.
And I'm very sorry, but that's just the way it is. And that's how I see it and how I will be voting. So thank you very much. Through the chair, I'm done.
Okay. Robert?
Laura, let me ask you.
Yes.
Those Snapper Creeks allowed contemporary or modern style homes?
Yes.
And they have allowed that since they incorporated 1997.
Correct. It's even stated in the ordinance that, classical, contemporary
So
style.
and that's a little bit different than the typical City of Coral Gables ordinance.
Correct.
Yes, it is.
Yes,
Now it may be different,
but back in the
day, you could not do that. So Snapper Creek has always had a little bit different because it was adopted from when it was in the Miami-Dade. My problem is that there was nothing in writing specifically letting the applicant coming in, whether it was 1997 to today, that those are guidelines you had to follow when it came to the open space and the 5% of the pool. Moving forward, if you notify all the future applicants, I understand. But this is going on for 2 years, all right?
Right. And that is, again, separate and apart, and I leave that
but
to
it's
the...
But it's not because if we make this change, it will affect that owner.
No, because his plans are in already.
This change is because the position of the homeowners is that they have always counted the pool, all right? And I'm not going to litigate that here because that may end up in litigation. I'm not the Snapper Creek litigator or their homeowners association attorney, and that is being handled
Well, Laura,
separately.
their own
This is being-
architect approved it the way it was.
But you're trying to litigate a particular thing that has nothing to do with the clarification amendment. This is an amendment to clarify, and that is a whole separate thing, and I don't know where that's going to end up. That's something between the association.
I'm not certain how what's going on with this gentleman impacts.
Right, we need to look at what
don't
the
know.
applicant has brought before us in this
before us
case.
today.
Now, I understand there are other issues, and we've heard them, but we need to look at what the applicant. Robert, do you want to continue?
Yeah, I see Snapper Creek has always been different than the city of Coral Gables. And when they came in, they had regulations that applied specifically to them. And I appreciate what the effort of making more stringent requirement moving forward. And that's great. I just have a problem that if an application was done prior to the changes, I could see, I could support this more if your proposed changes, would be moving forward. But anything in the past,
They're consistent. So my answer is, from the homeowners association, it has consistently, from the time of annexation, counted pools in its rear setback calculation. As you heard, there was one, excluding this one here, that got through. We have language in there that says that just because one mistake, as the city knows, doesn't mean you're going to maintain that and you're going to waive your requirement. And so this language is to be absolutely clear, and because more people are coming that are not local and using architects that aren't local and may not know that the site specifics and the protective covenants are of record, they're on the website. But it's the idea is to, listen, a 30-foot setback versus 50 when you're constructing a home is going to make a big difference on how you locate the home on the property. So this is meant to make everybody's life easier, but it is not a change in Snapper Creek Association policy.
Mr. Chairman, I'm done.
Robert, you're done? Okay. A couple of things I'd like to go through, if I may. The association was established in 1997, or the
No,
association?
the annexation, the
Okay,
association
let's
was
talk about the
established
Let's go through a few points. The association was established what year?
55.
1955, okay. Honorable Mr. Fine went ahead and read and spoke about ordinance 3249. Is it possible to put it up? Or if we can't, could you just recite it again, please? Or if there were some basic comments that Mr. Fine made.
Was in A94-2?
Here's the ordinance.
I'd like to go over what he read, that section.
Okay, I can start
If
with
you may,
the,
just-
I'll read the ordinance 3249, an ordinance amending ordinance number 1525, as amended and known as zoning code, and in particular use in area map plate number 15 by establishing zoning classification in Article 4 site-specific regulations by adding 4.87.
Can we go right specifically to what he spoke?
Whereas Snapper Creek is a neighborhood of 1-acre building sites which have been developed with a character unique to the neighborhood and in harmony with its landscape environs, that includes a changing topography, rich native vegetation, 2 lakes and homes designed in the classical contemporary style. And whereas the residents of Snapper Creek want to preserve and maintain the character of their neighborhood as it is
Okay,
being developed.
so stop there. Listening to that, to preserve the character, to me would be to preserve the character before annexation.
Well, it
The way-
continues.
No, I understand, but
Right.
I'm not an attorney, but the way I'm looking at this. The other thing is, how does the association fall within state statute 718, which governs condominium associations?
Well, it's separate. A homeowners association is governed by its own set of rules.
But this is a homeowners association as such. Doesn't it have to follow the guidelines of the state statute 718?
I think it has a different,
It has a different number, Mr. Chairman.
Alan might know. I'm not,
Homeowners Association and condominium law.
there's a
are two
question
different-
about,
I thought,
One is like 100.
yes, but is it 718 or is it
So it's not
716? It's a
718?
different number, but it applies to homeowners
so
association.
it's not the same as a condominium?
It is
A
not the same as-
Condominium is 718, so
Yes,
it's maybe
it's not
different.
the same as a condominium, but it is a separate numbered Florida statute that addresses
I just wanted to be clear on that.
homeowners. Yes,
Okay.
so it is governed by the state of Florida and the Florida statutes,
Okay,
correct.
so whatever the statute says by the state supersede whatever the bylaws or are written within the association, unless there's language that says the
Right,
bylaws, so forth, will govern. The other point that I want to go into is when you say you want to be more restrictive by changing or having the city change. Mr. Collar made a point that said you got to be very careful of it, because if you've got owners, before you do that change, that have owned the property, and they're now affected adversely, how does that work?
Well, let me answer from the homeowners. So we have protective covenants.
Okay.
As Mr. Collar told you, they were private. So when you buy in Snapper Creek or some of the other areas that have protective covenants, in your application, you agree to the terms and conditions in there as part of your membership. You're agreeing to whatever the restrictions are in terms of setbacks, et cetera. I know that they are provided. I know I went to the website. They're up on the website, so they're not hidden, they're not. And so, well, if you bought a house in Coral Gables, your front setback is normally 25 feet. When you buy in Snapper Creek, you can't say, oh, but it's 25 feet. No, you've agreed to, as a resident and owner of Snapper Creek, that you're going to build your front setback at 50 feet. And while the city zoning code did not match, which was part of the confusion, so the side setbacks matched what was in the county, but Snapper Creek, even from the 50s, was saying our protective covenants say the side street is 30. And I mean, the side setback is 30, not 15. And if you're on a street and that's your side, it's 50 feet. So those are the corrections that you'll see in what we have proposed, because it was confusing. So we caught, and so we're not taking away any rights, because anybody who lives in Snapper Creek already agreed to the more restrictive conditions as part of their membership. They pay to be members,
So
right?
you're-
So they pay extra to have more restrictions in this community.
Isn't in fact the restrictions part of the plat for Snapper Creek?
You know what? I can't answer that. I don't
okay.
know if they're part of the plat, but they might be as part. I have
Even
copies.
more notice than just merely on a website. It's part of their, when you buy in there, you buy subject to it.
Yes, when you buy, and it's in a title examination, your title commitment references them, but
And
they
that's why the
also,
homeowners association can enforce something more restrictive than what the,
Right, but at the same time, the city trumps if there's a conflict with the homeowners association language. And that's, I assume, why you're here, because you want to seal that hole?
no, actually,
no,
that would not be true.
Can you explain that?
If you buy into a community.
Right.
And that community has more restrictions
Okay.
than what the city has, then you're subject to the more restrictions for, maybe the city would allow X, but the homeowners association says you can't have that if you're going to live in this community, as long as it's more restrictive. Now, obviously, if it was more liberal than what the city would permit, then there'd be a problem with the homeowners association documents.
What if it's silent?
Well, that's the problem we have here.
Right.
Well, I'm not so sure it's silent because it says in this ordinance, the part where you stopped me, it goes on, and in a manner which is consistent with the high standards of the zoning code, right? And so that is why when the property became annexed, they apply. Again, if you could tell me, Laura, this is the first time you're ever going to enforce the pool rule, and I'm telling you, no, the community has enforced the pool as part of the setback. For us, it's clarification. And as to your point, AB, if this property were in regular Coral Gables, not in a subdivision, and I were to be proposing a change that was more restrictive than the code, then you have all sorts of Bert Harris, what are you doing, what have you here. But every homeowner here already agreed, signed off, accepted title with all the restrictions that are recorded, right? And in fact, has paid extra to be a part of this more zoning restricted community.
But if that's your argument, why are you here? If you're telling me that
Because it's being misinterpreted. So they come to the city and sometimes they're told it doesn't count, but I can bring you homeowners that can tell you it was counted when they brought in the pool.
If you're telling me it's being misinterpreted, then is that a decision that a planning and zoning board should be making? Isn't that not a legal decision that should be done by the courts?
Well, no, because what I'm asking is for an ordinance that will clarify the language.
She's asking
So
for
I'm
a
not
change
asking-
in the zoning code.
I understand you're asking for a change in order, but you're asking for that change because it's not clear.
Well, it's not clear to the city, and the city is adopting or thinks it has a policy that it has never shared with the residents of Snapper Creek. And so we have always interpreted it the same way. We aren't here saying to you, we interpreted it differently, right? And so, and I'm, again, the particular case that was presented to you may or may not end up in litigation, and that's a separate issue for the homeowner's attorney and for the association attorney, whatever, to determine. Because whether the city gives him a building permit or not, if the association thinks it violates its protective covenants, it can privately enforce them.
Correct.
And go to court and say, you can't build that house. All I'm trying to do is make everybody's life easier and say, we've always done it this way. Everyone here, except for the one mistake, has done it this way. We want to make it so everyone can see it and continue to do it this way.
Well, it's kind of two mistakes.
It's what?
It's two mistakes.
Well, yes.
Okay.
But one went through, but we have had other mistakes, and when that person goes to renovate or do something else, they have been forced to correct their mistakes. The association has asked them to correct their mistakes, not through the city, through the association. So the idea is we all make mistakes. The city makes mistakes, we all make mistakes, and we correct them. Because I wish the city didn't have the authority to correct, but many times I've challenged the removal or the taking away of a permit, and they go, we made a mistake. Okay, so.
Understood.
That was my case, by the way.
I would have been quiet.
Which is called found blue gas and
Yes,
wash. I'm
Felix.
just,
Now I'll have to go. Now I'll have to go read that.
If you could indulge me for 1 minute, I'd like to put a face on what the difference is. In other words, I'd like to call up the architect, Mr. Sotolongo, so he could tell us how many square feet is affected. In other words, are we talking about his house would have to be reduced 450 square feet or X?
So if we count the pool, I have to redesign the house. Redesign the house completely. Because that's 800 square feet of a 10,000 plus or minus house. So it's very difficult to make that work. But this is something that Laura said I want to clarify. When I go in as an architect, I don't know the history of Snapper Creek. I don't know what they've approved in the past. I don't know what they have done in the past. So I go there to clarify current understanding of the code. We were given the interpretation by their city architect.
Oh, no, I'm getting to that.
Wait a minute.
I'm getting
And
to
so-
that, but
so
can you
what-
answer my question about the
So they
square
asked me
footage?
earlier how much it would take to redo the house. It's like 300,000.
No, I'm asking you, how many square feet would be taken out of something else?
It's not about taking out. It's technically, the goal was to do a one-story home. We have, within the dormers of the roof line of the one-story home, we have rooms in there, right? That don't count for lot coverage. So technically, it's a one-story home. We work with the client for 2 years. We work with Snapper Creek for a year. And so at this point in time, to take out 900, 800 and something square feet affects the house. It's a one-story. Are we getting rid of the master bedroom?
So that's a very big pool.
It's a very big move at this point.
I asked you, is it a very big pool? How big is the
It's
pool?
900 square feet.
So,
In other words,
so the 900 square feet would be deducted from your home?
correct. From the, from,
No, from the rear
from the
setback.
rear-
The home is 15%, so his house is at 15%.
we're okay with the house. In other words, it comes down to the accessory structure or the pool.
Okay.
Right?
I'm sorry, but I needed to understand that.
Right.
Because it doesn't affect the house.
Correct.
It affects the accessory.
Or the pool, and the size of both. But again, that's a separate issue that will be decided in a separate forum. And I'm just here so that we clarify for everybody, and everybody can be on the same page, and there can be no,
One of the things in talking to the city attorney is when you look at the city's interpretation of the code, the pool in Sniper Creek, as someone who is doing a home, the pool is silent. There's nothing that says the pool is counted, not counted. So we had to clarify that with their architect and the interpretation of City Coral Gables.
let me just ask you this, and I know where you're going with that, but just as a question to you.
And the reason
If you
it's
were
silent is
building
because
it-
every time you bring it up, you can say it's not clear.
But if you were to go, so you're following the zoning code, right? You're following the zoning code, and it reads rear structures, you're 5% for accessory uses and structures. Forget now you're in Snapper Creek, you're anywhere else in Coral Gables, you count the pool, right? So you don't look
We're
and
not in
say, well,
Coral-
they said specifically you have to count the pool. You go to the zoning code where it says accessory uses and structures, and it outlines what you can have. In a property that's an acre, you can have a bigger cabana. On a 5,000 square foot lot, you're not going to be able to put a gazebo, a cabana, or a pool room, right? And you can have a cottage, a guest home, right? Officially, that has to be like 10% of the main size of the house, but you have to be a residential estate. You have to be a minimum of an acre and a half. So those uses are in the zoning code. So I'm saying, we say we follow the zoning code, so you would go to the zoning code. Because it didn't happen this time,
But the
we want to just make sure moving forward, we're not
restrictions are
commenting.
silent right now. That's why you're adding the language to be.
We're adding clarification so that it's clear that we're using the zoning code
Yeah,
when it comes to
that's where I was going.
And that's the point.
Right.
Moving forward, they're gonna have clarification moving forward. So they're silent.
Yeah,
You know,
and if I could maybe bring some closure to this, I think these are two separate issues. I really sympathize with your case, I really do, but I don't think it has a place in our decision.
That is correct.
I think that there are two things, obviously what the applicant has, and then the other thing is that, I mean, I'm sorry, but it's very damning, the letter from Zeke Guilford dated June 19th, 2013, and the first words out of his mouth is, in 1996, several neighborhoods were annexed. And then it just snowballs into the city getting involved, and Mr. Treyas making an interpretation and basically instructing his staff that it goes one way or the other, and it just so happens he went according to the interpretation from Jim Byers. So I really do believe that as far as possible relief for not the applicant, but possible relief for the homeowner is possibly actually asking for a variance from the Board of Adjustment for the simple.
But we're not here.
No, I understand.
I've had a conversation with the city attorney on this, and I asked her, and it's been done in other legislation, is if it's the intent of the board to adopt all this, that have an express exemption for this particular lot, which and let the homeowners association, if they feel their interpretation is more restrictive, that's part of their
Well, I have
litigation.
a recommendation that I think may put everyone at ease, and it comes from the Judge Fine, who says perhaps pass the proposed amendment with a proviso stating that this is for prospective clarification so that it doesn't affect the homeowner's case. In other words, this is for prospective clarification, and that way we're not trying to say this to them. We're just saying this is for prospective clarification. Is that?
Well, I don't want to disagree with the judge, but I'm a little bit concerned, and a little bit concerned about what prospective clarification would mean in a document. I think you could say what we have done is we've exempted items that have received first review by the Board of Architects. That we did actually for the zoning code. I don't know where this.
It's approved by by Coral Gables zoning, by the Design Review Board.
Yeah, it's
Approved
by the Design Review
approved by
Board
Snapper
or by
Creek?
the Board of Architects?
Board of
or is that
Architects?
the same thing? Or the Board of, not the same thing. Was it approved by the Board of Architects?
Yes.
And it was approved by the
Board of Architects?
Review Board of Snapper Creek, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But sorry. my
24 hours.
I think I have the solution.
Yeah.
Judge Fine, would you agree that the architect that your association hired is your authority having jurisdiction over interpretation of the code? Yes or no?
I object on the basis it's a leading question.
Mercifully, and I'm leading you to my point.
That's the answer.
It is, and frankly, he may have to suffer the financial consequences of his mistake. But what I wanted to point out is just, we are not trying to use this text amendment in this situation. What happened to this homeowner is not fair. I mean, it's not.
I agree.
And so we're going to have to deal with that.
We should have started with.
But because of that, we have the need to say, no, we want to.
That's why you're here.
We asked in 1997 to change, in 1997, in the ordinance, it says we're adopting the higher standards of the Coral Gables Code. We'll argue with them later about that. But because it's come up and because some people have interpreted to not include the pool because somehow it got grandfathered in without any ordinance ever saying so, now we want to clarify it so we never have this situation again.
Okay, pretty easy.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to pass with friendly amendments, E2.
So you'd like to make a motion to approve E2?
Yes.
As
Subject to staff's recommendation or as proposed?
As proposed.
No,
As proposed.
That's proposed by
As proposed by the applicant.
So we have that motion. Is there a second?
second.
Mr. Pardo did a second. Is there any discussion?
Yes. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I mean, I'm glad we've kind of broken through that logjam for the resident that's been stuck in quagmire for all of this. So my question to our esteemed city attorney is, or maybe the city would tell me, has the city denied the application at this point based on the covenant?
No, the city has not denied the application. What I was suggesting, and my apology to you for interrupting you, I'm sorry, that it wouldn't be appropriate, if you were going to consider an exemption, the exemption should be based upon an activity of the city, not an activity of a private part.
And
So what we did with the zoning code is we said that this is exempt, or what we said was you go under the old zoning code if you receive Board of Architects approval, and we would say that this ordinance shall not apply to any property that has received Board of Architects approval.
Okay, so the city's position is this is still an active application, an approved application? Because it was approved.
It's an,
His application, are you talking
Yeah,
about the
that's what I'm saying.
homeowner?
His application was approved by the city.
They approved it by not counting the pool.
I understand.
Right, right.
And there's some comments on trellises and stuff,
I
which are
understand,
minor.
but the pool is what's causing the issue.
It's
I
approved
understand.
with,
I don't know if the city has approved it.
It's in the process.
well, no, we have
in the
we
process.
have the comments from the city.
You haven't been permitted though, right?
No, it's still in the process.
It's in the process, but I mean, it hasn't been delayed. I don't think the city has said not approve it, because whether they approve it or not, the association issue is
So
separate.
what verbiage do we add to allow this application to move forward without?
Anything moving forward from today, this will,
Okay.
but anything retroactive,
Well, then I think that it would be best you have to pin it to a point. And I would say anything that's received Board of Architects preliminary approval is exempt from
Sue, are you
this
okay with that?
provision.
Yes.
Friendly amendment? Okay,
Absolutely.
I'll propose that friendly amendment.
Does that
Thank you.
work? Does that work for the,
With today's, in other words, anything received with today's date?
no Board of Architects approval, so that has to go back, preliminary Board of Architects approval has to go back, not today. Something might have been approved a year ago.
Yeah.
That would be.
And the year ago would count the pool. Like we said, this fell through the cracks. The pools have been counted.
Are
And
there,
I'm not discounting what happened to Mr. Toyos, but I'm saying the board, the homeowners of Snapper Creek, and there was a change. Robert Wade, for those of you who know, used to be the architect and was for decades at Snapper Creek. And when he passed away, Mark Reeder came in. And like they said, that's a whole, melange that's going to have to be figured out either with mediation, litigation, or whatever. And I'm sure they'll all come to a satisfactory accord, but it is separate. And I just don't want anything in the language to affect how Snapper Creek, to have a homeowner say, oh, but now I don't have to count the pool. We're going to say, no, we always counted the pool. The city is saying they didn't count the pool, but we always counted the pool.
Laura, how many projects do you have that are being permitted right now within this
That are
development?
with preliminary, that are in, like you're saying, with preliminary
Yes.
Board of Architects that have not received permits.
But that have already gone into the Board of Architects, for example? Yeah, 4. Out of those 4, let's assume it's 4. Out of those 4, your architect didn't make any mistakes?
They counted the pool.
wait a minute, you know what? This
You
is
gotta
my
come
fault.
up.
You need to come up and identify yourself. My apologies.
And for the record, Mr. Portuondo, not Mr. Sotolongo.
Can you state your name and address, please, for the record?
Quinlan, 11190.
Can you bring down, sorry, just for the court reporter.
Heather Quinlan, 11190 Snapper Creek Road, Coral Gables.
And you were previously sworn in, correct?
Yes.
Okay, great.
So you're saying that there's 4, roughly 4. Let's assume that to be a true
There's 4
statement.
vacant lots. Yes. There's 4.
And
four
they've already
plans.
gone through your process?
Hmm?
So your architect has already reviewed and approved their designs?
Yes.
So the way that this is being amended with the friendly amendment, if there is a mistake that's done at that point, that would be covered with those other projects?
No, because it's the BOA, not their board.
Architects is.
Right.
Yeah, BOA zoning.
Right.
And impact fees permit. So that's.
So there,
the
but there's
governor's
4 already, so forget about the Board of Architects.
Have they received preliminary approval from the Board of Architects
From the city.
of the city?
Yes.
Okay, so those projects, if the association made a mistake, hopefully not, but if they did, under the way it's being proposed, they would be protected also.
Theoretically, yes.
Theoretically, yes.
Theoretically, under what
Theoretically.
we're looking at, not what happens internally.
Right, you're looking theoretically from a city standpoint,
Correct.
but
We're
from
not-
an HOA.
We're not
stand-
looking what happens
Right.
within your HOA.
I would
We
send them a
actually
letter.
brought 3 sets of
Right away.
plans
Yeah.
to a meeting in Coral Gables and sat with Juan Reyesco and
Tsunami.
Tsunami.
And Jennifer, and I think Arceli may have been, because it was, in those particular ones, it wasn't that the pool wasn't counted, is that the structures were too big, or there were other City of Coral Gables
Well,
zoning code issues.
That's actually where I was going, is how do you take care of those problems when
It's not
this-
really our job. It's not really the Snapper Creek job. The Snapper Creek job is to see adherence to the zoning code. But the reason we had the meeting was because we were.
Wait. The Snapper Creek job
protective
is to see adherence
To
to
the
your
protective covenants.
bylaws.
Protective covenants.
To
And
your
so-
covenants, correct.
Correct.
Not to the
Not
city.
to the city zoning code, although the association has the authority to enforce the zoning code.
Understood.
And so what's happened is we were starting to get a lot of mistakes that Heather was catching that had nothing to do with the protective covenants. And so that's how we ended up, because the designing architects were throwing the city architect under the bus. And I said to Heather, that doesn't make sense, because the city architect does aesthetics, not zoning.
Correct.
And there may have been some mess during COVID when they changed the order of how things were done. But at that meeting, it was determined that to make it clear for everybody and to make it a simple process, let's amend the code, let's clarify, and let's correct, because we mentioned at the time, the setbacks didn't align. And they go ahead, let's just clean it up all at once.
Right.
So,
So we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion?
So wait, the motion right now is right now that I don't believe we have these conditions on there. It was just a straight approval. Is that the motion?
Mine was a straight approval of the applicant.
Of the applicant, not the
With
staff's.
that,
With a friendly amendment that Chip,
are we putting the Board of Architects approval in as they're exempt, or that's not in?
That's what I thought.
that's what.
That's what Chip proposed.
did.
Yes.
Was that accepted by the?
Right.
Yeah, it was accepted by.
It was
Yeah.
considered a friendly amendment.
Right, and that's a friendly amendment, that's
Okay.
it. The amendment has stains.
and so
Okay.
how will the amendment, just so I know, how is the amendment is that this is prospective
That the
from the city standpoint?
from the city standpoint is that this ordinance does not apply to any project which has received a preliminary Board of Architects approval.
The city, okay. We're good with that, yes.
And I do want to ask the city, your recommendations that this motion does not take into account, can you just summarize them briefly for the record?
So the conditions that staff had were just a 2 about the pool not counting, because that would be against what was promised to the Snapper
Which
Creek.
is the whole
time of
discussion we
annexation.
had.
Understood.
And
I just
also
want to
then-
put it on the record.
Yeah, and also the increased setbacks of the various.
Just for the accessory structures from
7.5 to 8 feet.
Understood. Thank you.
What was your objection to the 8 feet?
Just because I couldn't understand what the reason behind the
don't
increase
either.
in setback.
Why?
For the accessory setbacks, because it's been what the Snapper Creek Association has been doing since
In the
the
covenant.
beginning of time, right?
Okay, that's your arbitrary number, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay,
The 8, the 7, and the 7.6 was in the site-specific, and that.
It falls under because I feel like it. Okay, it's fine.
Right.
It's okay.
I just wanted to put it on the
7.5
record. So
feet.
we have a motion, we have a second, we have the friendly amendment that's in there that's been accepted. Any other discussion? No?
No, vote on it.
Call the roll, please.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
Suka Walensky,
Yes.
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
Javier Salman,
C.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes,
Just because you.
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Should we take a
Just take a break.
Let's take a
How many
5-minute
more
break?
we have tonight?
8-minute break.
No. How many more items we have?
There are 2, so we have 3 items. What I'd like to do is I'd like to move E5 next. Are we taking?
Yeah.
We're going to take a break. Let's take a break. Okay. But I'm just saying.
We have like 3 left, right?
Yes.
Just when you thought it was going to be simple.
Recording stopped.
COVID or something like that.
What was the
E5. Oh, we can do that. Yeah, I think he just went down to the back.
Coordination. Even if you were talking about a 50. These are enormous lots.
I know.
It's great. My goddaughter lives nearby, and these areas are fully, they're canopied. It's absolutely gorgeous.
One of the prettiest areas in Coral Gables.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Sue, those red X's reminded me of when Paseo.
Let's go ahead and call the meeting back to order.
Recording in
When
progress.
Javier comes, he can join us. We're going to jump over to E5.
We still have that map.
Item E5, an ordinance of the City Commission providing for text amendments to Article 2, zoning district, Section 2-201, mixed use 1, 2, and 3, MX1, MX2, and MX3 districts, and Article 3 uses, Section 3-209, live work minimum requirements of the City of Coral Gables zoning code to allow a reduction of storefront transparency on frontages facing single-family and multifamily uses, providing for repeal of provision, severability clause codification, and providing for an effective date. E5 public hearing.
Thank you.
So Jennifer Garcia, City Planner. So there's two parts to this proposed text amendment from the Commission. The first one is for all mixed-use districts, that if they're facing a single-family or multifamily use, as a way to transition to those uses that have less transparency. When I say transparency, I mean glass, storefront glass. It's a way to transition to those kinds of uses. There'd be a required windowsill between 18 inches and 24 inches to kind of soften that look. I think there's a PowerPoint slide that was sent to Coral Gables TV, so I can kind of illustrate that. It's also found on page 2 of your staff report, if we wanted to show that PowerPoint slide. Yes, so the top one is showing a windowsill, which lessens the amount of glass that's showing that will be fronting single-family or multifamily uses. And then the bottom image is showing glass that's, from the top to the bottom of the storefront, which is showing more transparency. So that would still be allowed and required for any storefront in our mixed-use districts, but if you're facing multifamily or single-family, they'd be required to have a windowsill. The next change, the last change, there's only 2, is for live-work units. Since a lot of these live-work units are embedded and within our multifamily districts and neighborhoods, less transparency seems to be needed because a lot of storefront is kind of harsh when you're facing a multifamily use. So when a live-work goes to approval for Board of Architects, they're allowed to reduce that transparency requirement from the minimum of 60% to 40%. 40% is because that's the minimum requirement for any multifamily ground floor transparency requirement. You can take off the PowerPoint slide. Thank you. So those are the two proposed amendments right now. That's it.
You're proposing to reduce the minimum of 40%.
Is your microphone on?
Sorry. There we go. You're proposing to reduce from 60% to 40%.
Minimum, yes. If Board of Architects determines that it's needed for the neighborhood. When you're facing single family or multifamily.
Minimum or maximum?
Minimum. Because that's the minimum in multifamily right now.
Yeah.
So, for example, MF2, which allows live-work units, the minimum ground floor transparency requirement is 40%. They can always have more, but usually you don't want to have too much transparency because people are living behind those windows. So the intent is that the live-work would face the same, transparency glazing requirement that's across the street.
Don't you want 40% or less?
No, minimum. So it can be more glazing. because you want to have at least some windows and glazing facing the street because you feel more comfortable as a pedestrian knowing there's windows facing where you're walking, your eyes on the street.
If I may, let the record show that Javier's back with us.
So what is the reasoning behind, what's the philosophy behind this? I mean, what's driving all of this?
So there's been some recent proposed projects that have a lot of glazing, a lot of glass facing multifamily. I don't think any of them are facing single family, but multifamily. So the concern is from the residents, and they reached out to members of the commission, is that the requirement of 60% for the ground floor storefronts or live work units is too harsh. It's too commercial looking. So the intent here is to make it look less commercial looking, so it looks like it fits more in the neighborhood.
Okay, so this is a really stupid question. If someone doesn't want to live there where it looks too harsh and why don't they just live somewhere else?
I think it's because they already live there.
So this is for a new development coming in to someone who
Correct.
already lives there.
Yes.
And why is it too harsh? Because it's too bright, or I mean,
It looks too commercial. That's the verbiage I've been receiving. That looks too commercial. They don't feel comfortable. That looks like it's too commercial. It should be on Miracle Mile or some major retail street and not within their neighborhood. Because remember, live work is something you can have in MF2 throughout North Ponce area, surrounded by multifamily zoning.
so if I'm a commercial owner of a building or a store and I want more glass, I want more, am I being denied something?
No, this would really apply more for new construction.
Yeah, but if you
are being denied in certain areas.
Yeah, 100%.
If you're facing single family or multifamily.
No, if I'm building something and I want to put more glass just through my design, and I can't now, I'm being denied the opportunity to put more glass.
If you're facing multifamily or single family uses.
Yeah, I mean, based on this.
Yes.
So
This is
so
more of
someone's being
the
affected.
intent of this is to protect the neighbors that are facing these commercial properties.
And this is in commercial areas, not in residential areas.
The MX text amendment for the window
But it's not
sill.
really single family, it's downtown living, basically, right?
Well, no, we have MX 1, 2, and 3 throughout our entire city. So we have some MX 1 that's abutting and facing single family. But it's usually multifamily.
Where is MX3 facing single family?
MX 1.
Oh, MX1.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, MX3 is, but the thing is that all these requirements apply to all of those mixed-use districts, MX1, MX2, and MX3.
So MX1 is the old duplex zoning.
Yeah.
No, the duplex is MF1,
MF1,
multifamily
okay,
one.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
In my opinion, with all due respect, for me, what has a greater impact on residential is our lack of control of exterior lighting of those new commercial projects that look like they're out of Las Vegas. They look like they're part of a runway coming into MIA. You could see it across across the city. There's no requirement to come up with a plan where people can do something nice and still light their buildings in such a way where it's not as glaring and offensive, especially to the residential areas. I mean, I think that has a much greater positive impact if that could be honed, where it could be codified in such a way that, through foot candle studies, through, to accentuate the buildings, but still in a subtle and nice way, because the way I see the city, it has changed in many ways, but the lighting is just, you can't turn it off. And those people that live there, they go to sleep and they get up to go to work. And they bought a single family home and now they built a new building in front. It's like staring at those spotlights up there. Try that for a whole night. That's not good. I think it would be better to have more of an impact on something along those lines than possibly taking away the property rights of someone that has a commercial building that needs a storefront in the commercial areas under.
And by you're right, by restricting the glass area on a commercial, you're minimizing the visibility into the spaces. I agree with you on the lighting. I think that's gonna be a way to.
We've done lighting, we use consultants, we make sure that it's subtle but nicely done. And I'm sorry, but no one at the city has any control because there's not one ordinance about that.
What's the limit on the first floor height in any MX project?
What's the limit? There's not a limit. There's a minimum of 15 feet.
Pardon me?
A minimum of 15 feet.
A minimum, but,
Yeah,
but
there's no maximum.
there is no maximum. So if something's zoned for 45 feet, they can have one story, it's 45 feet, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So what does a 24-inch thing do when all the rest is pretty much, the sky's the limit in glass? What does that achieve?
Well, I mean, I've never seen, propose a 45-foot tall ground floor.
I mean, under
but-
this, if I had 45 feet and I'm going to just deduct 24 inches for that little thing that I have to do, and then I got this all glass above it, does that make any sense?
No, but again, I've never seen anyone waste their amount of FAR they have for a property to do massive ground floor
I
heights.
understand, but this just limits me from building glass to floor to ceiling glass, right?
That is correct, in commercial.
Yeah, in an MX project.
The city just built their parking garage next to the police station. I think they have glass all the way down.
Correct, but we got to remember that we're here because there are residents that have spoken to the city that would like to soften the areas that abut.
Right.
And there may be other ways to do that. I'm not saying they're not, but this is the proposition that's coming before us from the city.
Well, point well taken, and I agree with the lighting, and what about landscaping in front of it?
Wait, I think your mic might not be on.
I mean, a landscape buffer, it makes a lot more sense than, putting this artificial 24-inch thing.
So if they're at the 0-foot lot line, having landscape is difficult to accommodate because it would require some kind of covenant in the right of way to allow some kind of planter or something on the sidewalk. There are areas in our city that we don't allow planters on the sidewalk because they dirty the sidewalk or pavers or whatnot. I think there are some instances that they use planters for meeting the open space requirement, but there's not a requirement to require some kind of landscape in the front. I think we would want to limit that more or less, depending on the location of it, because you still want to have the visibility into the storefront. So you want to have landscape covering the store itself. You just want to limit the amount of light coming out, the amount of glazing, and soften the facade.
Jennifer, quick question.
Mm-hmm.
It says here that the text amendment was approved by a city commission on December 12th for first reading already.
Yes.
If it went to commission already, why are we?
It's part of the process to get your recommendation to go to the commission.
So it first goes to commission for first reading and then comes to the planning and
Typically,
zoning
it goes to
board?
planning and zoning board first. However, some commissioners request that it goes to the commission first, I guess, as a discussion. They take a vote at first reading, and then it comes back to planning and zoning.
I would like to see examples because I think that staff.
Can I
would be-
ask you to speak
I'm sorry.
into the mic?
Staff would be helpful to this board or any board to say, well, here's a picture of this on such and such a street, and here's a picture of that, and look at the residential over here, and this is how it affects it. I'm sorry. I mean, I've done this all my life, and I'm having a really difficult time seeing this life-changing impact on something like this compared to other things that could be done. That's my
Through the
opinion.
chair? Yes. I agree with what Felix is saying, number one. Number two, we have a board of architects. As part of the submittal to the board of architects, you have to present who you have across the street, who you have on either side, and the board of architects has to take that into consideration with regards to the approval of the projects. I have no problem with the 24 inches along a residential street that's facing I think that that'll just cut down the window size. It might make it more residential because it's less storefront to commercial. I can see where there's a logic to that, but we have that. We also have minimum lighting guidelines, okay, for public streets, between 1 and 1.5 foot candles. And I think part of the problem is that that light level that they have on their building is bleeding out into the street because of a misdirection of lighting. And I think that having a lighting standard requirement with regards to residential being perhaps a little bit lower, maybe it's no more than half a foot candle at the opposite side of the street, would help them focus the light on their building and not on the neighborhood. And I think that that would be a much more efficient way to deal with this particular residential issue. Not everything is an architectural solution, because we have architectural solutions through the Board of Architects. And perhaps those considerations need to be outlined more clearly as part of their review, rather than try to codify something.
Well, the issue right now is that if they go to BOA and BOA says this looks nice, but are you meeting your zoning requirements? Zoning says no, you're required to have 60% transparency, and they only have maybe 40%. There's an issue. So this is allowing BOA to opine and say, hey, this makes sense in this location. You should be able to have less transparency.
But what is the transparency of your proposed example here as the percentage of?
What, sorry?
You have two examples. You have maximum glazing for commercial, and you have windowsill required when facing residential. What is your percent glazing there that you're suggesting?
I think we did the calculations here, and it was more or less 40%.
So then if you want to codify that, just say make it no more than 40% when facing single-family residences.
And that's the second part of the amendment.
Okay. Well, that's one, and then the other one is one of lighting. That you should have no more than 1.5 foot candles on the sidewalk adjacent to the building, and that it should bleed to no more than a 1/2 foot candle across the street.
Javier, what I'm hearing from you and from Felix is that basically there should be another layer in addition.
I agree, yes.
To be added. Is that what?
Mr. Chairman, you're right.
Okay.
I would defer it.
What's your?
I would defer it. I think, to have staff get a little more time to do, more thorough job on how to reduce the impact on those neighbors.
Okay, because staff right now what's before us is the glazing, nothing more.
Right.
What you're saying, so you want to defer it because that's not sufficient.
I think that's not sufficient, and I think that based on what Javier mentioned, that there are other percentages.
I think it would be helpful. She can't hear you.
Sorry.
Sorry.
As Mr. Salmon said, that there are certain restrictions that should be looked at very carefully when it comes to glass glazing in order to make sure that we don't also take property rights away from people. And therefore, I think it has to be studied better.
So what I'd like to ask is, before we start that consideration, if you're done with your presentation, I'd like to ask Jill if there's anybody, I don't see anybody here.
No.
That's for this. Anybody on Zoom or other platform?
No.
So I'll go ahead and close it to public comment. Then, Felix?
I would like to defer this particular item.
You'd like to make a motion to defer this item?
To defer the item, the motion to defer the item and have staff study this a little more thoroughly to be able to come back and make sure that we've covered the comments that were provided by this board.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it, but I'd like to make a friendly amendment.
Okay.
That the city take into account the lighting levels of the lighting of the building, including light coming from the storefronts, okay, in their overall calculation with regards to it, and that they limit the amount of light on the sidewalk adjacent to the building to be no more than 1.5 foot candles, which is pretty standard for parking, okay, but that it should be no more than a 1/2 foot candle bleed across the street. And so that they have a specific goal or something like it to add to this
What foot candle is required for sidewalks?
So currently in section 12-102, the outdoor lighting permitted with standards, the requirement is outdoor lighting shall be designed so that any overspill of lighting onto adjacent properties shall not exceed half a foot candle vertical and half a foot candle horizontal illumination on adjacent properties.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
It's there.
So that's
Yeah,
in there
but
now.
the key here is that you need to also include the light coming from the storefronts. And, you know, in street lighting design, and this is something I actually have a certain amount of expertise. I did South Miami's Central Business District and worked with them, with the city of Miami Beach on Lincoln Road. And we discovered that most of our lighting was coming and uncontrolled from the storefronts. It wasn't the overhead lighting poles. When we had the lighting level designed by the poles, it worked perfectly. When you turned on the storefronts, we had a huge disparity of lighting. And so that,
How did you, can I ask, how did you control that? Did you control it by the type of business within that area? Did you control it by the
From a
glazing
commercial-
that's within the glass? Or
we did limit the amount of light that they could spill out from the storefront. And we evened out the light along the street because the problem was that we had the way your eye works is it works in contrast. And so your eye adjusts to the bright level when you're inside the area of that bright level. And when you go into the dark level, then it's really dark while your eyes adjust. And it takes some time for that to happen. And so that the perceived darkness is not necessarily dark. It could be a half-foot candle or 1.5-foot candles, but when you have 5-foot candles in front of a storefront, that's a problem.
I would be very surprised if the city kept track of all the projects that have been built, that the half-foot candle spillage is enforced.
I understand that, but that's really the problem. That's the problem that we have here. And so the way it can be handled is that you limit the amount of light spill from the storefront after hours. And so there's a minimum lighting that you can have, and then when you're open for business, you have your lights, and that's fine.
But Felix, that was not the way you were talking about the lighting. You were talking about the lighting that was coming from the buildings in general, from the appearance of the buildings. So now Javier has come in and started to discuss about the lighting that's coming from the storefront. So your motion was to look at the lighting in the building that's coming from the exterior of the building.
The exterior lighting and the negative impact on these areas.
Understood.
But there's already language that controls that. Do they have?
But they don't have it for
How do you
storefront.
enforce it is the problem.
Yeah, right now, as you well know, you finish a building and your electrical engineer provides a certification. Normally, an electrical engineer provides a certification as far as the foot candle inside the property for parking lots or parking garages, et cetera, to comply with the Miami-Dade County, which is what they read. The spillage component of it is more than just for parking areas. The spillage comes from just about everything. You walk outside tonight and you look across Biltmore Way, and you're going to see, when you turn around, you'll see that impact. It comes from uplighting, downlighting, inside, outside, and we all know that it's too much. And like I said before, it's the same as looking at those lights up there. It's very difficult to do. And if the premise is, let's provide some relief to the neighbors that are across the street, I don't think it's hard to do.
Right, but from what I'm understanding from the city is it's already within the code as far as the lighting from the outside. If developers are just not adhering to it, then that's something that the city needs to look into, how to enforce it. But for this discussion, what Javier has brought up is the lighting that comes from within the store or within the location.
I have no problem with the friendly amendment.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, since it's already been adopted on first reading, might it be better to consider denying the application, explaining that the lighting is more important, and advising the commission as to this is what needs to be done? That may be a more effective way to get your point across.
So, would you like to change your motion?
Yeah, I would deny it based on the complexities of the issue.
I'll second that.
So we have denying the motion as it's presented.
Do you also want to recommend that they look at light spillage? You know, I want them to, they're going to see the transcript.
Right.
But it might be useful to reflect that in the motion.
That is a very good idea. You know, you want to add that to it, the lighting?
To deny it.
Yes, so we're denying the item.
Right.
With a recommendation to explore the lighting emanating from the buildings
And its impact on.
and its impact on residential areas.
So you're welcome to
Yes,
that
I am.
friendly amendment. Chip, do you have any comments on
I
this?
think it's good.
You're good. Any other comments? No? Call the roll, please.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
Yes.
Sue Kavalinsky,
Yes,
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
Javier Salman,
Yes.
Davey Eisenstadt.
Yes. Next, I'd like to move into E6.
Item E6, an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for text amendments to the City of Coral Gables official zoning code pursuant to zoning code Article 15 notices, Section 15-102 notice to amend requirement for applicants required public information meeting to occur prior to review by the Board of Architects and to require additional registration information for future notification to be included in meeting notice, providing for repeal provision, severability clause codification, providing for an effective date. Item E6, public hearing.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Jennifer Garcia, City Planner. I think I have a PowerPoint for this one as well, just an image. It's just the flow chart. So there's two parts to this proposed text amendments that also went to the City Commission last month. The first one is to change the order of when the public information meeting happens. Right now, the requirement is that any proposed development would go to DRC, and then they'd make those adjustments based on staff's comments, go to Board of Architects for preliminary approval, and then they have a public information meeting at that point with their approved plans from BOA before submitting and going through the Planning and Zoning Board and City Commission. So the proposed change is to have that public information meeting that the applicant hosts and they send out notices and such, would happen before the Board of Architects preliminary approval instead of after with their BOA approved plans. So that's the significant change. The other minor change is to require that the notice have a QR code and website for residents to be able to sign on with our email notification that we have at the city to have them be notified in the system earlier on in the process.
So it's basically just much more notification and doing it earlier in the process, as you just stated.
Right.
Through the chair?
Yes.
I'm all about transparency and public notification. However, you're setting a situation up of a possible unintended consequence, which is that you'll be presenting to the public a project which has not been approved by the Board of Architects, which may or may not be substantially changed during that process, which would then require another public hearing. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes.
Okay.
The idea is to get neighbors to participate earlier in the process, but you're absolutely right. There would not be approved plans at that point.
But the plans could be changed through the Board of Architects.
Of course.
Which would then negate and make liars of the presenters to the public at that point.
Right.
Isn't that correct?
Yes.
I think that's the unintended consequence I'd like to avoid.
Absolutely.
So I am completely against this.
Yes, Felix?
There is an issue also is that the public, when it comes to the Board of Architects, has a very limited role in being allowed to speak. They can speak before. It's very, very limited on what they can say or not say. I thought that it wouldn't be a bad idea if and only because I was concerned about what you were concerned, but I was thinking that maybe they could have it before and then afterwards. In other words, the way it is now.
That's not what's being presented here.
I know. That's what I'm saying. When you look at your chart, if they have it before and they have it afterwards, because also keep in mind that at the DRC, the plans are somewhat cooked, and by the time they get to the BOA, really, the public has not been able to say word one. They can't speak at the DRC, and they're very limited in what they could say at the BOA. I think, in my particular opinion, is I thought that maybe not just moving it, but adding the public there. I mean, there's nothing to be concerned with the public. They're not going to come up and bite you. But at the same time, it also gives the applicant an understanding of the expectations from the particular community. That's the way I see it.
You know,
And I agree if that's what was being presented, that we're forcing another public hearing before and after. That would make more sense to me.
No, this is a public information meeting. In other words, this is a private meeting. This is not a public meeting.
Correct.
And this is upon the
Yeah,
developer.
but it's recorded and it's presented. When you
No,
go,
the applicant's information meeting?
the public information meeting is recorded and it is,
If it's recorded, then it's on them, but we just get back summary of what happened.
that's
what was
correct,
asked,
but
and-
that's a filing and that's recording,
Yes.
okay?
Okay, yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
It's being recorded, all right?
There's some places, such as Collier County, that is very elaborate when it comes to recording their public meetings. And the reason is twofold. It's also to protect the applicant, from things that are being said. And they do a transcript and they videotape. The applicant has to have it videotaped, and they have all the information, on file.
Okay, but that can be on them, on whoever's holding that meeting.
Right.
If they want to do that, that's fine.
Right.
But I think all we're saying here is that they have to have a public presentation of the project. That's all we're saying. And what you're saying is that it should be before and after.
Correct.
Okay, which I would agree with, but that's not what's being presented.
Right, and I think the more the public has a right, I think the public has a right to know what's happening right from the beginning. The DRC meetings they can attend, they can't say anything. But I think at the point that it goes to the Board of Architects, I think there should already have been a public meeting. Because if there's major outcry at a public meeting, there's going to be major outcry before, it's going to be major outcry afterwards. It gives the developer a chance to gauge the community sentiment and let them know where they're falling short. Okay, so I totally am for the meeting before the Board of Architects. And I would say if there are substantive changes at that point with the project, with the Board of Architects, if there are substantive changes, there should be a secondary meeting with the public to inform them of those updates and the changes.
How do you define substantive changes? Is
Well-
it arbitrary by a person in the staff that says, oh, there's been too many changes?
Well, I think if there's significant architectural changes, yes.
Don't go there, Sue. Just have the second one.
Okay, so two meetings, okay?
I mean,
But let me
we're
ask
talking
you-
about substantial projects here. We're not talking about an
Right,
addition on the back
exactly,
of a house.
exactly.
okay?
And the more the public has right from the beginning, the better. Because I've been there where it's at the end of the process and the public gets to talk. And by that time, the ship has sailed.
But understand one thing, the way that we're talking about is the public is not going to get to talk at the Board of Architects.
I
They're going to,
understand.
the developer is going to be required to have a meeting with its neighbors,
Right.
present their project, then go to the Board of Architects. Then what you're saying is after the Board of Architects, go back and have another meeting with the neighbors
So is
before
it,
it comes to the planning and zoning. Is that?
You require before coming to the plan zoning to have a neighborhood meeting.
Yes.
Well, this is requiring to have a meeting before the Board of Architects.
Right.
An additional meeting?
Right. Also, let me ask you,
Well, no, sorry. The way it's being presented is to move the one meeting before the Board of Architects and no longer have another meeting before the planning and zoning.
Right, because the
What
concern
Javier
is,
is suggesting, or Sue or Felix, is to leave the public information meeting the way it is, but just add an additional one before the Board of Architects.
right, and if I could ask you something, what is the current radius for public notice?
1,000 feet or 1,500 feet for a comp plan change.
Okay.
Before we continue, we're running close to our time. I'd like to see if there is any sentiment to extend. And if so, for how long? There's one more after this,
I make a motion that we extend to 9:15 time certain.
9:15 time certain. I would agree with that.
Second it.
you can do it on a voice vote.
Everybody in favor to 9:15?
Yes.
Say aye.
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 Might I suggest that you could approve this item on a modified basis? That your recommendation is there be a public meeting before it gets to the Board of Architects and another
Believe-
public meeting after it gets
Well,
subsequent?
Planning and zoning.
Wouldn't it be, if that's the case, if
That's before it even gets to planning and zoning. These are, I'm sorry, these are the private meetings that the developer has with the
correct,
neighborhood.
what you're suggesting is leaving the public information meeting the way it is, just adding one before.
That's what you are suggesting, and I'm suggesting.
And what
if you want to do
happens-
that.
And what happens if there's changes at the Board of Architects? You have to go back to the neighborhood meetings, and then you're gonna have to come back to get that, to go back to the Board of Architects, and then another meeting before coming here.
No, Robert, I don't think that's the intent. The intent is simply, when you go to the Board of Architects, eventually you need to get it approved, preliminary approval. So once you have that preliminary approval, then you would have your other public information meeting, telling people this is what was approved by the Board of
Yeah,
Architects.
but it kind of makes sense what Robert is saying to me. You go to the meeting beforehand and you present your project. Then you go to the Board of you have input, then you go to the Board of Architects. The Board of Architects completely, for whatever reason during that process, changes the appearance, changes things in the project. From there, now it goes on to the next public meeting before the planning and zoning. It doesn't go back.
No, I don't think so, because staff put on their Board of Architects preliminary approval. In other words, you must have the approval. If the BOA, that's between the architect and the BOA. The architect can go 2, 3, 4 times to the BOA until they get that preliminary approval. And so that preliminary approval, Board of Architects preliminary approval, then you would have the other public meeting after that. In other words, if it's changed 4 times, you don't have 4 public information meetings.
But that's what I want to clarify, because what
Yeah,
Robert was saying is, what happens if they change
I
it?
think Robert has a good concern. The only thing is that staff put on there the words preliminary approval. In other words, it's approved. Now they go back to explain to the public what was approved.
Then you go back because it's the meetings required before coming to the Planning and Zoning Board.
Correct. But that's why they
What
put.
we're adding is one meeting with the neighborhood before the BOA.
Basically to present the project at that point.
And the reason is because the public cannot speak at the DRC meeting.
Correct.
They have no.
really the Board of Architects.
Or the Board of Architects, they don't speak
Well,
either.
it's limited. They could speak before, it's a very limited type of
Very
thing.
limited.
They can ask the
Yeah,
chair.
this I think is very good for the public that are impacted by the project.
No, I'm all for opening and transparency. So that, I think that what we're suggesting is in that vein, and I would be ready to approve it.
You want to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the recommendation of staff with the addition of an additional public information meeting prior to the Board of Architects preliminary approval.
Second.
So to be clear, you're just adding one meeting before the Board of Architects, the community meeting.
That's correct.
And this is specifically between developer and neighborhood.
That is correct.
Correct.
Same as they do before they come here. We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Chip?
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Good idea.
Call the roll, please.
Robert Behar,
No.
Sue Kavalinsky,
Yes.
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
Javier Salmon,
Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Baby Eisenstadt,
No.
4-2.
Next item is last one.
I'm sorry, the text amendment
Wait,
does
E-
move, Mr.
E4?
Chairman? The text amendment with the vote does move.
Back to E4, okay. Item E4, an ordinance of the City Commission amending Section 14-103.3, meeting panel review, full by full board, conflict resolution meeting, special master quasi-judicial hearing in order to amend certain procedures related to the conflict resolution and special master quasi-judicial process for appeals of decision by the Board of Architects, provided for a repeal of provision, severability clause, codification, enforceability, and providing for an effective date. Item E4, public hearing.
Thank you.
So again, Jennifer Garcia, city planner. I have a brief, there we go, there it is. So these are making some clarifications to the appeal process for Board of Architects, as well as adding in some new ideas as far as the special masters. So if you go to page 3 of your staff report, there are the changes there, and strike through and underline. The main thing is that, well, two things. One, once, okay, so let me go walk through the chart. So Board of Architects approval or denial, right? They make a decision. If someone appeals that decision, then it goes to the conflict resolution, which is a kind of an interior inside meeting with the city architect and the applicant. From that it becomes a settlement, and then it goes to special master for a quasi-judicial hearing. At that point, what's being proposed is that if it's a single-family residential project, it'll be heard by one special master. However, it's in all other projects, like the large multifamily, mixed-use project, then it'll be reviewed by 3 special masters. The intent is that one person is not making the determination of appealing the Board of Architects. It'll actually be 3 people for a discussion.
Majority.
Right, exactly. The other clarification is that if there are any changes during the conflict resolution or during the special master process, that it go back to the Board of Architects if the city architect determines that's substantially changed.
And Jennifer, quick question. Those 3 special masters, who are those, are those Board of Architects?
No.
They're independent.
Right.
Elected by whom?
By city architect.
By the city architect?
Yes. I think they submit to the city manager and they select the special master.
I have a real problem with this change of process. I think it's a terrible idea. I think we're diluting what the Board of Architects does. If there's an aggrieved party now, they go straight to the commission.
No, right now they go to special
Or
master.
it was like that.
No, special master.
Special master.
It's a
Right.
special master.
Right, well, there's a special master now, but before that.
No,
it would
but
go
what
straight
they're,
to the commission.
Felix, pardon me, but what they're saying is, instead of having just one special master, to have 3 special masters.
For larger
So there's a
projects.
majority rule for larger
The
projects.
problem I have is who selects those 3 special masters?
That's why I asked the question. I have a real problem with that. I
Who do you
don't
think it-
think the
Robert,
city
who do you think
manager
should select it?
or anyone like that is qualified because they're not architects.
Jennifer, I think it would help, through the chair. Jennifer, I think it would help us if you walked us through a scenario where
Should have
somebody,
deferred this.
where, let's say an architect goes and presents before the Board of Architects. I'll present this scenario. You correct me as I go along. And let's say you have your select 3 architects that are reviewing your project, and they hate it. They think that this is just not going to be acceptable. You have the right to ask for a full board review at that point. Is that not correct?
No. On major project, you have to go before the full board.
Correct.
So, and then if you get denied,
Okay.
you appeal it to the special master.
Which would now be,
One person.
which would now be 3 people
Right.
to make a determination by majority.
Up to now, the one that I've been aware is Mitch Alvarez,
Yes.
who has been the special master.
Who appoints him? How does he become special master?
He was appointed, I believe, by the city manager.
Right, with recommendations from the city architect.
Okay. Now, it will be 3 special master to review major projects. The question is, who approves those 3 members?
The same process. Recommendation from the city architect to be approved by the city manager. Because the city manager, in essence, is really the one that's organizing and appointing these Board of Architects.
It's really the same process, except there's 3 people instead of 1. If if you're okay right now with one person being appointed, which is by the city manager, why do you have a problem with more eyes? I'm just,
You're right. Now, you have to get anonymous approval from the three, or is it majority approval? Huh?
Majority,
2 out of 3.
right.
And the other thing is that one of
Could
the
you
previous
speak
applicants.
to the mic, because it's really
One of-
hard to hear.
One
you.
of the
Sorry.
previous applicants, tonight mentioned Robert Wade. Robert Wade was legendary, and he was the architect for that particular homeowners association. Dick Schuster was the architect for many years for Gables Estates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the qualifications of those people, and Mitch Alvarez, is very, very different than someone else. I really believe that this is going to go down the path of watering down what the Board of Architects and what a full Board of Architects does. I think it's a huge mistake. I'm voting against it under every condition you can think of.
Felix, what it is the Board of Architects still has the same control as they do today. The difference here is that when it's appealed on a major project, 3 people will look at the appeal, not one person.
That's the only difference.
I understand that.
That's the only.
But I have an issue because the selection process is not coming from the Board of Architects. The selection process is coming from someone else.
The city architect recommends to the city manager who is going to be in that special.
Again, the people that are left out is the Board of Architects.
But the person,
process.
but Felix, the person that is the one person that you like, that is very good, he's going to be part of those, he'll be the one person out of the other 2.
On behalf of the court reporter, I request that all persons, not singling out anybody in particular, speak through the microphone. Thanks.
Sorry. Just for the record, I just think that in the future, we will regret this. And I cannot vote for it under any circumstances.
Okay.
Jennifer, through the chair,
Yes, sir.
how many times do we have to deal with this?
How what?
How many times does this actually occur, that we have a Board of Architects that disapproves a project that has to go to special master for review?
Most recently, a lot, but how many actually are large projects that are not single family
Right.
in the last year? I can only think of one.
Has there been occasions, though, where an individual has objected and not the, I thought there was a situation where some neighbor objected and that went on appeal. Do you recall that?
I think the most recently one, I don't think they went through the appeal process. I think they withdrew their appeal.
The most recent is the Merrick Park project.
Out of the project, yes.
Let me ask you, is there a conflict if the city appeals a project and the person that they've appointed is the one ruling as a special master?
I'm not sure what I understand. Where would the city appeal?
If the city protests a decision from the Board of Architects, City Commission.
The city commission wouldn't.
Does the city have the right to appeal a decision of the Board of Architects?
The city as a commission as a whole?
The city has appealed Board of.
Let's say the city architect. I think your hypothetical is for some reason or another, the Board of Architects does something that the city architect
Disapproves.
finds objectionable.
I think you're saying city commission.
City Commission.
If the Board of Architects approves something and the city commission does not agree with that approval,
Well,
can they appeal?
Well, typically, it's
just
not
don't
really an
approve it.
appeal. It doesn't, as I understand it, an item that's a large project where a Board of Architects approves it, it ultimately goes to the
Commission.
to the commission for approval. So at that point, I presume that the commission is going to weigh in on how it feels about the project.
Well, that's way downstream though, right? I mean, the city commission has appealed historic preservation decisions.
Because they were considering it.
Yeah, I'm just asking, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of the conflicts that might be, and I don't know if a 3-2 vote is better than a 1-0 vote as far as, I mean, a 3 vote is better than a 1 vote if it came to a situation like that.
I think depends on who it is, and who selects them. And depends on who it is and who selects them. And I feel, again, still as uncomfortable as I always have. I've seen this go really, really, really wrong. And that's where people scratch their heads and say, who the heck approved that? And if you start to, if you facilitate the special master, eventually you will be dealing with the special master or just those 3, not even a full board. I have a problem with that.
We've got 6 minutes before we're supposed to finish. So do we extend time?
No.
We call the question.
If we don't extend time, is there a motion?
I can make a motion to deny.
You have a motion to deny. We have a second to deny.
So we can vote on it.
Any friendly amendments to a motion to deny? No? Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Quickly. If we deny, we stay with the process the way it is today. Only one special master.
As of right now, yes.
That would be your recommendation to the city
If
commission.
you deny, we're gonna keep the process the way it is today.
It's our recommendation.
Is the process broken now? Is that why they're changing it?
Well, so right now, the conflict resolution has the word may instead of shall require an appeal process. So they're clarifying that we're requiring that quasi-judicial process of an appeal. Right now, it says may. So trying to clarify that. That's one of the changes, right?
I think there's some
That's- we're
technical,
okay. I think we're
I think
okay with
there's
that
some
change.
technical changes that are being made in the process. I
Right.
think you could approve it except for one possible motion is approval with the exception of expanding to 3 special
Right.
masters.
I'm just curious to know why they're changing it. Is there a problem? Why someone just said, let's have 3 instead of 1? Is that why they changed it?
Yeah, there's some concern that just one person is voting on a substantial project.
That's why we use
The other issue is that if there's changes throughout the process of the conflict resolution, as it goes to the special master, there's changes, there's no requirement for it to go back to Board of Architects. And they want to see what the final, decision is.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because if you remember just a few years ago, one of the large projects on US 1, well, how'd they get away with this? How'd they get away with that? And all of a sudden, what was built was completely different than what was approved. Again, somebody was asleep at the wheel. You don't need 3 masters for that. You just need someone to, from the city to look over the approved plans and make sure it gets built that way.
We have 4 minutes. We have a motion, we have a second, so we do have to take a vote.
So the motion is straight denial.
It's a straight denial unless there wants to be a friendly amendment right now.
Well, I would like to change my motion that the technical changes are approved, but the selection of 3 special masters is denied.
And what about the last language about if the design of a project should substantially change as determined by the city architect during the conflict resolution or special master hearing process, the Board of Architects shall be required to review the changes of the design. Do you want to keep that as well? Because that right now is not in our process.
Is that not at the behest of the applicant? Doesn't
That's
make
up
that
to the
decision?
applicant as to whether or not he wants to make changes and
yeah,
resubmit. I mean, that's what you're saying.
Yeah, it's not an automatic review, is it? I mean, it's if the applicant wants to move forward, right?
Yeah, if he wants to move forward, he wants to submit another project, that's fine. It's up to the applicant.
So really, the only thing that you're finding objection to is the expansion to 3 special masters in this proposal.
And it's because I don't know why.
No, I'm not. I'm
No,
just
that's
trying
the only
to get
reason
the
I'm
motion.
doing it, is I don't understand.
As we got
I just
4
want to be
minutes.
clear, unless we extend it in 2 minutes, we're finished with this, no matter where we stand.
I'd like to make a motion that we extend it 5 more minutes.
We have a motion to extend it 5 more minutes.
Right.
Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. So, let's move.
So
I mean, the explanation was given was that some people say that something was done wrong, or there's too much power, or someone didn't do it right, but there's really no specific thing you can point to as to why 1 to 3?
No, again, the concern is just that if the Board of Architects has a full board reviewing a project, and they have, 7, 9 members reviewing a
Full board,
project,
yeah.
as it moves towards the process to the final, if they appeal it, obviously, and they go through a conflict resolution, they go to the special master process, at that point, it's just one person. So the concern is, why would that water down to one person to sign the final vote? Why wouldn't you have 3 for a supermajority?
Okay.
That's the concern.
What doesn't make sense to me is it goes back to the Board of Architects later.
If it's substantially changed. Because remember,
If
the
the
conflict resolution,
special masters approves it, right, the way that, then does it go back to the board?
no, if it's the same, yeah. If it's the same project they've already rejected, it doesn't have to go back to the board.
That's part of the problem.
That's what I don't understand.
It's just,
It's only if it's been changed through the,
Changes.
if it's been changed substantially, according to the city architect, if he finds like it's been substantially changed.
Then
through
it
the
has to
conflict
go back to the
resolution,
board.
it goes back to the
Otherwise,
board.
the decision of the special master stands.
Right,
And overrules the Board of Architects.
right.
All right. Thank you. That's all I need to know. Thank you.
So we have, right now, we still have a motion to deny
you want to add the.
and a second.
The changes? All right, I'll accept.
we really can't hear, you
I'll
really need to
accept-
be on the record
I need,
throughout the conversations.
so I'll accept Chip's friendly amendment.
And
So I understand the motion. The motion is to approve in part, approve all technical changes, deny that portion of the ordinance that would expand to 3 the
masters.
special masters.
You sure you want to leave out the 3 special masters?
Yes.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second.
Yep.
Any other discussion? Call the roll, please.
Sue Kowalinsky,
Yes.
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
Fabio Salman,
Honey, can you come please pick me up? Yes.
Chip Withers,
Yes.
Robert Behar,
No.
A.B. Assistant.
No. I like the 3 masters. I thought that was a good idea from me.
So it's passed on a 4-2 vote, correct?
Yes.
I believe a motion to adjourn is in order.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there something else that I missed?
No.
No,
the
we need a
next-
second. We need
The
a second to
next
adjourn.
Planning and Zoning Board meeting
Second.
is Tuesday,
Oh,
February 20th. That's all.
That's what's in the emails that you sent.
That's correct.
Thank
So what
you.
is it, February 20th?
Correct.
See,
Wednesday?
If not, you would be here on the 14th of February.
thank you.
I know.
So we have a motion to adjourn. Everybody say aye. Aye. Thank you, everybody, for coming.